Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DanaBuckler Show. My name is Dana, and this is an episode that I have to be honest with you, I don't even know if I ever really thought I would get this far. You've seen it in the title. This is the 10th anniversary of this podcast. This podcast started out as How Is This Movie in 2013. In 2018, I rebranded the show to the DanaBuckler Show. I just want to start by saying that in early 2013, I started to listen to a podcast. I had discovered podcasts fairly recently around that time period. Being a big, passionate movie fan, I sort of gravitated to one particular podcast. And I listened to it every week. It was religion to me. It was something that I always listened to. It was something that the host, I felt like I was sitting at a table having a conversation with him. And I think that's the power of a really good podcast, is when you feel like you're in the room with the people having a conversation. It was this podcast that really made me say, okay, I want to give this a try. Looking back on it 10 years later, I remember at the time I was working 6 days a week. I had one day off. It was a Sunday. I got all the equipment that I could find to record a podcast, begged people to do a show with me, recorded some episodes, and in one day I would record, edit, and release. And I remember being so passionate about that. And I remember right before I started this podcast, I sent an email, or maybe it was a Facebook message, I don't remember, to the host of the F This Movie podcast. And I said, hello, Patrick. My name is Dana. I just want to let you know I'm a big fan of your show. And by the way, I'm going to start a podcast, and hopefully someday you'll get an opportunity to listen to it. You know, throughout the 10 years, Patrick has been a guest on my show a few times, and one of the main contributors to F This Movie, one Mr. Adam Riske, has graciously joined me numerous times over the past few years. So it's my honor and my pleasure to welcome the podcast that inspired me to want to do a podcast. So for this 10th anniversary show, please welcome my friends Patrick Bromley and Adam Riske. Gentlemen, hello, welcome.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having us. So nice what you said about our show and everything. And yeah, I mean, I've always loved just the way that you went about doing your show, but just to see the evolution from, film history episodes to you're a wonderful interviewer, and then just the topics in between. It's awesome to see your growth over the 10 years too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, Dana, and congratulations on 10 years. It is not easy to put out a podcast for 10 years, and most shows do not make it that long. So it is a testament to your professionalism and your creativity and your commitment and your passion and your drive that you continue to do this and put out a great show. So congratulations. It is a huge accomplishment.
I really appreciate that. And coming from you guys, that really does mean everything. I just want to start by saying, Patrick, you first did my show in May of 2016. So that was a little over 6 years ago. And wow. At that time, and by the way, I should point out that F This Movie is still going strong. It's still my Wednesday morning, up in the morning, cup of coffee, listening to the latest episode. But I wonder if we could talk just a little bit about, what's been going on with you. You did a show with me about 3 years ago when we were all going through the lockdown. And I just kind of want to, I know you've been introducing films, you're doing a lot of stuff, outside of the podcast. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just, I've been fortunate to hook up with a friend who works for a theater chain that's kind of local around here. And so we started a series called Smash Cut Cinema, where once a month, I program and host like kind of cultish movies late on Saturday nights. It's born out of this series that I've done for a number of years as a member of the Chicago Film Critics Association, where we host a movie every month. But it's been really fun to pick movies that, like, selfishly I want to see on the big screen, either again or for the first time, and program those and hope that people will come out. And so far it's been pretty good. Adam has been to all of them because he's the most committed to Smash Cut Cinema, and he's the nicest person.
Well, then this question is for both of you, and that's amazing, by the way. This question is for both of you. Patrick, you said that this is something that In some cases, it would be seeing a movie on the big screen for the first time. So the question for both of you, was there a movie or has there been a movie that you have screened for Smash Cut Cinema that you saw for the first time on a big screen, and did it give you a completely different appreciation for the film?
I don't know if it gave me a new appreciation, but it was fun. I had never seen RoboCop on the big screen. And so RoboCop is probably one of my favorite movies anyway, but to see it on the big screen, and then I brought my son Charlie with me. And so I was kind of also watching it through his eyes and wondering, like, what does he make of all of RoboCop? And does he get the satire? And does he think it's as cool as I do? So that one was a lot of fun.
That's a really interesting question, because I don't think I've even talked to Patrick about this, but the ones that on paper I'm the most excited for are ones that I'm excited for, but like the thing that's great is there's been a couple that have snuck up on me. I think my favorite smash cut that you've hosted is Heavy Metal, because it was a discovery for me, and seeing it in a theater for the first time after decades literally of anticipation of one day I will watch it, but I haven't watched it yet. It kind of married something that I love about your series, Patrick, which is just that it's midnight movies 2 hours early.
Right.
And somebody who's in their 40s, it's a gift to have that. But it just kind of had that special midnight movie feel. But to answer your question more directly, Dana, I had never seen Hard Target in a theater. I missed it when it had its original theatrical run. And it doesn't play rep all that much, which is a shame, because Van Damme movies should be playing like daily in rep theaters, in my humble opinion. But seeing that movie and seeing just a John Woo action movie on a big screen as compared to on your television screen really does make like a huge difference. It just shows you kind of what a master he is and how impressive his blocking is, and the staging and the momentum and the editing and everything like that. So that was kind of like, for an action movie junkie like me, just heaven that evening.
Okay, rapid fire question just came to my head right now. This is for both of you. Rank the following movies. Okay, Hard Target, Broken Arrow, Face Off, Mission Impossible 2. Go.
I'm going to go Face Off, Hard Target, Mission Impossible 2, Broken Arrow.
Okay.
All right. I'll go bottom to top. All right. Mission Impossible 2 is the least of the four. Then I will go Broken Arrow. I know I should say Hard Target, then Face Off is the best, but I got to flip it. I think my heart is with Hard Target first, and then Face Off just slightly behind it, but they're both great movies.
Hard Target was the first John Woo film that I saw in the theater. I remember it. 93, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a life-changing moment. So sorry about that, gentlemen. Every once in a while, one of those rapid-fire questions are just going to come to my head. All right, so these were the top 10 movies of 2013. So number 10 was Thor: The Dark World. Number 9 was Man of Steel. Number 8 was Gravity. Okay, see, look at this. Now, listeners, I just need you to know, because this is an audio-only show, and this was not planned.
Yeah.
As I said Thor: The Dark World, Patrick held up what was clearly a collector's cup that you got when you saw Thor: The Dark World.
That's exactly
10 years.
that I'm still drinking out of years later.
I love that.
I don't like that movie at all, but I like the cup.
The cup's great.
I have a Lee Daniels The Butler popcorn bucket, so I'll go get it. I didn't know we were doing show and tell.
This is why I wanted you guys on the show. Thank you. Number 7 was Monsters University. Number 6 was Fast and Furious 6. Number 5 was The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. Number 4 was The Hobbit: The Desolation of Smaug. Number 3 was Despicable Me 2. Number 2 was Iron Man 3. And number 1 was Frozen.
Yikes.
I say all this, and Patrick, not to put you on the spot, but I cannot recall your end of the year show for 2013. But if you can kind of remember what your favorite film of that year was.
Dude, what came out in 2013?
Well, those were the 10 those were the 10 highest
None
grossing
of those
films.
were on my top 10 list. I know that.
Patrick, I think you and I had the same movie as number 1 that year, because you did a show on it. I was still doing my written article. I wasn't on the show yet.
Okay.
We both had Wolf of Wall Street at number 1.
Oh, that would have been my number 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that was of these 10 movies. Gravity was the one that I saw in the theater. I was like, that was interesting. That was interesting. A lot of these I did not see, but Gentlemen, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because I have always trusted and respected your discussions when it comes to, to borrow a line from Patrick and F this movie. When you guys have seen something good lately, I'm keenly tuned in to the segment. Have you seen anything good lately? Adam, you were the one that brought up Mobland, the John Travolta film. I watched that right after you mentioned it, found a copy of it. I think I paid $24 to rent the movie, had a great time, reached out to the director, had him on the show a couple weeks ago. Great discussion. So I love it when you guys do that segment. But for this show, for the 10th anniversary, what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you guys, have you seen anything good lately over the past 10 years? And by that, I mean, I'd love for each of you to recommend a movie starting with 2013 up to 2023. I'll start with you, Adam, and then we'll go down the list.
Okay. So my pick for all these years, I wanted to go with movies that I don't think the majority of film goers or movie fans have seen, but is not so obscure that you need like a PhD in a certain genre or whatever in order to enjoy it. So mine are more independents and kind of mid-level movies. So 2013, I picked the movie Drinking Buddies, which is directed by Joe Swanberg. It's kind of one of his most polished movies. He kind of was one of the main mumblecore guys in the early 2000s. And it's an ensemble romantic comedy drama about people who work at a brewery, and Olivia Wilde, Jake Johnson, Anna Kendrick, and Ron Livingston are all in it. Jason Sudeikis has a small part. The director, Ty West, has a small part, a rare acting part for him. And it's just like a really good relationship movie. It's a really good movie about somebody being in the friend zone and not knowing kind of how to navigate their feelings towards a friend and a coworker. It's like the things that you feel comfortable saying, the things you don't feel comfortable saying, because what if I confess my feelings and it ruins our friendship or it ruins our working relationship and stuff. So it's a real human story. It's something that I think a lot of people can identify with. It's not always going for laughs. It's not broadly comedic, but it's often really funny. And it's resonant. It's something that's kind of stuck with me, even though I don't revisit it all the time. I can remember a lot about the movie, and it makes me want to watch it anytime I think about it.
So that is a film that I remember hearing about, but I've actually never seen it. So I've started a list. So nice. I'll have some movies to watch this week. Patrick, you've seen Drinking Buddies. Your thoughts on the film?
I haven't seen it since 2013, but I miss Joe Swanberg movies. He was on a real run. I haven't seen all of his early kind of mumblecore movies, but when he started working a little bit more with some like independent studios and casting movie stars, and he had a run of really interesting films. He did a series on Netflix that's kind of like an extended Joe Swanberg movie called Easy, and there's a whole storyline that's very similar to Drinking Buddies, where they're like opening a microbrewery in a garage. And then he just kind of stopped. He hasn't made anything for a while, and it bums me out because Drinking Buddies is very charming. It's like exactly the kind of movie I could put on anytime. It's such a hangout movie with like, these are characters that I like spending time with, having conversations that are interesting. I'm into their relationships. I'm into their relationship struggles. I'm not, into the world of like drinking or microbrewery or anything like that, but it taught me something about that world, which I always appreciate when a movie teaches me about something that I don't really know. Yeah, it's a really cool movie. Awesome.
Oh, perfect. Adam, way to kick things off.
Yeah, and a couple bonus recommendations for Joe Swanberg movies. The movie because after Drinking Buddies, I was so excited about the next Joe Swanberg movie, and I think it was his very next one. It was called Happy Christmas. It's with Melanie Linsky and Anna Kendrick, and Joe Swanberg stars in it too, and it's really, really good, and especially because it's a Christmas movie, I would recommend it for this season also.
Okay, perfect. So Patrick, your 2013 pick.
I did this wrong. I just like picked movies,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at my list and I'm like, well, these are all movies that I would recommend.
Yes.
I initially just like picked stuff that I felt like talking about, but these
Yeah.
are all movies I would recommend
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
My 2013 pick also features Ty West in a supporting role, and that is You're Next,
Yeah.
the slasher / home invasion movie from Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett. Adam and I were fortunate enough to see this at like an early screening at a horror convention. And it's one of those few experiences of seeing a movie pre-hype, pre-release, where it legitimately felt like it blew the doors off, where it really was like, this is going to be huge. And then it came out and it wasn't huge. But it's really good. And I think as the years go by, it only gets better in terms of like what it's doing with the horror genre, what it's doing with the trope of the final girl, what it's doing to the home invasion genre, a subgenre of horror I do not like. It brought back Barbara Crampton. It might still be Adam Wingard's best movie. I would need to look at his entire resume. I mean, The Guest is really awesome too, but if I had a gun in my head, I might pick You're Next. It's one of my favorite horror movies of the 2010s.
I mean,
If you had a gun to your head, like regarding Henry's situation,
Yes, exactly. If this was I would become a better person, and I would recommend You're Next.
I was listening to you guys talk about that, talk about regarding Henry. That I haven't seen that since I saw it when it came out on home video. So this would have been the 90s. Didn't realize the J.J. Abrams connection. Didn't even remember that it was John Leguizamo that was the one who committed the crime against him when he was going to get a pack of cigarettes. I just remembered him painting.
You shouldn't smoke, Spawn.
I read something where he said that Leguizamo said he used to get so much hate mail at the beginning of his career because he shot Harrison Ford and killed Al Pacino in a movie.
I'm sorry, baby. John Leguizamo shot me.
I mean, did anybody ever give him hate mail over The Pest, or was it just his roles, just his roles in those films?
You don't worry about the people who give you hate mail over The Pest. You worry about people who write fan letters.
So,
you got the restraining orders handy.
Okay, so I've seen You're Next one time, and it's been several years, and I just the memories I have from it was I found it to be an incredibly enjoyable film. I wish I could say more about it, but it was a film I've seen once, and it wasn't one that I was like, oh, I'll never watch that again. I was like, oh, that was great, that was cool, and just kind of moved on to something else. But Adam, your thoughts on You're Next?
Yeah, I mean, it was so exciting to see that movie in 2013. And as Patrick said, I'm not a fan of the home invasion subgenre. I have a big problem with it because I just don't want to feel the way that you're asked to identify with. Right, so I'm looking forward to Desperate Hours, I guess is what I'm saying, which Patrick and I are going to watch as part of a future podcast. But I loved that it gives you a final girl to really root for. It basically turns into Die Hard and Home Alone. And yeah, it's great. I find it, I don't know if it's me or if it's just kind of the way things are, but I feel like there was this sort of marriage of mumblecore and horror that really like bore some like really cool movies for a couple of years. And then I thought that it was going to be like this new wave of something, and it never really continued. It sort of kind of started and then stopped in a very brief amount of time. But You're Next and then Drinking Buddies kind of were like, that was, if we're talking about 2013, that's what I was most excited about in cinema in 2013, where I was just like, there's all these new voices and different genres and stuff. And then the Man of Steels of the world kind of took over. So,
yeah. I forgot, I didn't even make the Joe Swanberg connection, but he has a supporting role in You're Next, and he's
very good.
Hilarious. He's so funny in that movie.
Yeah. So you're Adam, moving on to the year 2014.
Draft day. It's draft day.
Oh,
That's my pick. It's draft day.
Ivan Reitman.
Ivan Wright.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah, R.I.P. Vontae Mack, Mr. Chadwick Boseman too.
Vontae Mack, no matter what.
No matter what. Draft Day is a movie that snuck up on me. It's one of the things that I love about at this movie is just it allows me the space to come back to movies and be like, I don't know, that was okay. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, I don't know, I kind of thought it was maybe a little bit more than okay. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, I don't know, I kind of feel like watching it again. And then like a month later, I'm like, it's a part of my whole being now. So I've had that happen several times. Draft Day is just like the perfect example of like the remote drop type of movie. It just is like Moneyball's fun, but this is like fun in capital letters version of Moneyball. Kevin Costner is at his like primo movie star dick swagging mode. I don't know. It's such a kind of goofy version of representing the NFL, but you know, Any Given Sunday was also, and that movie is crazy entertaining too. But I find it interesting too, and that's kind of, it's only sort of been exacerbated this year, especially. But Draft Day was Draft Day and Moneyball were kind of the first movies of the sports hero are not the heroes. The guys pulling the strings and the businessmen are the heroes. And now, you know, we've got Air and things like that. And it's like making the deal is making you a hero and stuff like that. And I just find it so interesting in a weird way. I would say it's like a negative because it's more just the people capitalizing off of the talent than the actual talent. But they make good movies and you get a lot of great performances out of them. And yeah, Draft Day is just super fun. It sort of, and I'm embarrassed to say this, it kind of got me back into football after a long period of time of not wanting to watch it all that much. You know, it helps that I live in the Chicagoland area and the Bears are fucking awful. So like that helps out a lot. But yeah, once I saw Draft Day, I started playing fantasy football and I got back into it. And, you know, when there is Draft Day, like now I've got, without fail, like at least 3 or 4 people hitting me up on Twitter and sending me like Draft Day memes. And it's always just a day that I look forward to. And it's kind of become like a running joke about movies that Adam likes in the history of this movie. So for that, I have a lot of fondness about it.
I love it. So one of the reasons the movie works for me, and don't get me wrong, I really like Any Given Sunday. But
I do too.
But the fact that I love that movie, but the fact that they don't have the NFL license, that the NFL took a look at that script, the Oliver Stone script, said, no, this ain't happening. It's kind of like when the Air Force looked at the script for Iron Eagle and said, no, you're not going to get to use our planes for this movie. No. The fact that Draft Day does have that, well, I'll call sort of the NFL license, that the NFL did grant the permission for them to use, you know, the real teams, the real, you know, it really sort of has this level of authenticity to it that so many football movies are missing because the NFL is so sort of tight on letting that license go out. I mean, I look at movies like The Replacements and all these other films where they just couldn't get the permission to use the NFL shield, if you will. And I think that movie works really well for me because of that, because it's like, okay, well, this is the Cleveland Browns and they're dealing with the Seattle Seahawks and I get all this. And don't get me wrong, it's also a really entertaining film, but it works especially for me because it has that level of authenticity like Moneyball does, because, you know, it's a story of the Oakland A's. But Patrick, your thoughts on, you guys have talked about Draft Day a lot over the history of this movie, but to refresh the listeners of the Dana-Buckler Show, your thoughts on Draft Day.
I just found out that the NFL didn't grant the license to Any Given Sunday, which explains why I've bet on the Miami Sharks every year, and I have lost a fortune. Yes. So I thought Draft Day was the end of the world when it was coming out for the reasons that Adam outlined, because I was like, oh my gosh, now we're just making movies about, like, I was like, fantasy football has gotten so big that now we're just making movies about the draft, and I had no idea how much worse it would get, because in 2023, every other movie is like about a product, you know, about the launch of the BlackBerry or the Air Jordan or Flamin' Hot Cheetos or whatever, which I haven't seen. I haven't seen Flaming Hot. Maybe it's one of the year's best. I don't know. I like Draft Day a lot. I find it incredibly entertaining. I love it 100 times more than I would otherwise because of how much I associate it with Adam, and I love Adam so much that like I love how much this movie means to him, and so it will forever hold an affectionate place in my heart.
Awesome. Now, Adam, I have to ask you this question because I'm a lifelong New England Patriots fan, and I have settled into the sad, hard, cold reality of the future of the team that's been tough for me. I'm getting used to it. I'm getting by. Just want to let you know it's not easy. But I say all this because come draft day, I get very excited for the real draft day, that is. And I watch about the first half an hour and then I'm just done. Now, do you actually sit down and watch the 3 days of the NFL draft?
No, not the 3 days. But I mean, like last year was very exciting because the Bears had the number one pick.
Fair enough. Yep.
They didn't keep it until draft night. And then this year they're going to have probably like two of the top, at least 10 picks. But the thing that I find, and this is more about football than it is about draft day, but the thing that I find interesting and sort of compelling about the NFL is it's a league that values the prospect of the unknown so much higher than the known. And I find that sort of in a weird way charming because it's sort of aspirational, but I also find it weird that like a proven player it's like a used car. Like they just don't give a shit after a while and they'll trade you for magic beans. And like, cause like Justin Fields is the Bears quarterback and like, there's a lot of controversy of like, do we sign him past his rookie deal or do we go into the draft and draft a new quarterback and stuff like that? And when you were hearing like these, mock trades, it's like, I don't know, maybe we could get like a second or third round pick for him. And I'm just like, it's like you're asking for like the 70th best magic bean for a guy who can on his best day throw like for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and stuff like that. I just find it fascinating. And that's kind of what part of the quote unquote magic of draft day is like, this number one pick is such a huge responsibility and like they're not overstating it. Like it's something that is it rocks the ground below it of any franchise that has it. And it's so funny how Frank Langella does like his stupid fucking analogies, but they're great because they're so dumb, where he takes Kevin Costner to a water park and he has to show like a water slide and he's like, are you going to make me a big splash, Sonny? And it's just like, you could have done this in an office or on the phone. I just love it. It's so hammy. I love it.
I love it. Patrick, your 2014 movie.
My 2014 movie is a movie that was not even on my list in 2014, but has only grown in my estimation in the 9 years since then. And I won't talk too much about it because the Blank Check podcast just devoted 3 hours to it. But it's David Fincher's Gone Girl, which has become one of my favorite David Fincher movies. I never read the book. I saw the movie in theaters in October of 2014, and I was like, I don't know, it seems kind of misogynist. I have some problems with it. And then I watched it again when it came out on Blu-ray, and I was like, oh, no, I'm stupid. This movie's great. And the more I think about it, the more I like it. I think it's one of the best cast movies of the last 10 years in terms of not only is every actor in it great and delivering like home run performances, but there's all this meta textual shit going on with the casting that makes it so much better. Like all this stuff we know about Ben Affleck, the public persona, makes his casting that much more interesting as the lead of this movie. And I was just talking about this. Before we started recording here, I was recording a Patreon episode with our friend Rob, and Gone Girl came up, and I was talking about, like, I don't know that the casting will last. Like, will it stand the test of time? Because in 2014, the casting of, like, the girl from the Blurred Lines video, Emily Ratajkowski. Yeah. was so smart to have her be like this college student mistress that Ben Affleck is fucking on the side. It was such a smart piece of casting. Now it's just like, oh, she's the actor that they got for this part. And I think some of the metatextual stuff is removed from it. Doesn't make it a worse movie, but I do think you kind of needed to be there in 2014 to really appreciate like how smart it was to get Tyler Perry to play this showboat lawyer. And now you could watch it and just be like, oh, that guy's great in the part, but you don't necessarily know all the stuff that surrounds it, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And Gone Girl for me is, I saw that in the theater and it was not knowing the source material like you, Patrick, had not read the book. All I knew is it was a Fincher movie. And so I was going to watch it. And Affleck, for me, there was this weird sort of in my mind, not realizing that it was Fincher's, because I'm so used to Affleck directing Gone Baby Gone, The Town, Argo, and, he's kind of the stars in most of those movies. And it kind of felt like an Affleck movie half the time for me. Like, this is something he directed. Like, it was just this very, I don't know why I'm saying blurred lines, but very blurry. The first time I saw the film, that's how I was kind of responding to it. But it takes some serious turns that if you don't know the source material, and I will keep this completely spoiler free, but it takes some turns that I just was not ready for. Like, I thought this was going to be more of a down the nose, early 90s thriller type of film, the kind of movie that would have starred Alec Baldwin in the early 90s. But it certainly is not that type of movie, and it's fantastic. And like you, Patrick, I listen to Blank Check for me. So it's F this movie on Wednesdays. It's Blank Check Sunday mornings with my coffee, because their episode usually drops around midnight my time on Saturday night. So, and I was actually just listening to their episode on Mank today, a film I have yet to watch, which, I will now. Well, I guess
Are they fans of Mank?
They like it a lot more than I do.
I'm an hour into the episode, and they've opened the dossier, if you will, and I've kind of stopped listening to it because I haven't seen the film, and I don't want to be spoiled beyond what I've heard so far. My biggest takeaway from it was Fincher wanted more money than he, to make this movie than, the big studios were willing to give him. So Netflix said, make whatever you want. Is Mank good, Patrick?
I don't like it.
No.
I think it's Fincher's worst movie.
Adam?
No. They say something towards the middle of the Blank Check episode where Griffin Newman kind of posits that it's like people are guardedly always like, I don't know, I didn't like that. Am I wrong for not liking it? Isn't it boring? And that's kind of where I fall. Like, I think their conversation is by multiples more interesting than the act of watching that movie.
Well, maybe on that note, I'll just finish the episode, and one day, if I actually have the time, I'll put it on. But we live in a world where there's so much to watch. You have to really remember the old days, the video store. Here's remember, you guys were old enough. We go to the video store in the early to mid 90s. You would pick out 2 or 3 movies, and you would see them through to the end because you rented them. You took them home. You paid money for them. Now there's so much content that it's like, I have 2 hours. I had better make the right choice, because that's just the thing. Adam, your thoughts on Gone Girl?
I don't know. I kind of need to reserve judgment on it a little bit because I haven't seen it since 2014. Yeah. I remember at the time knowing that it was a movie I probably needed to see again, but then just never did. I thought it was entertaining for the most part. I had trouble with it because I thought it was maybe misogynistic, but maybe I'm wrong, and just not giving David Fincher enough credit. And like, that's kind of part of the point of the movie. And it just didn't come clear enough to me on the first viewing. I also wasn't really sold on Rosamund Pike's performance. But like I said, I think I need to give it another crack and see if I like it a little bit better.
Your spoiler-free thoughts on The Killer, since we're on the subject of Fincher.
like his new movie, The
Yeah.
Killer? I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I don't subscribe to Netflix regularly, but I plan on after Thanksgiving. I'm trying to time it so I can watch, so I can subscribe for 1 month and then watch. I want to see Fair Play, which is the Alden Ehrenreich movie, Maestro, The Killer, May, December, and the Sly documentary.
Okay, so I can talk briefly about the Sly documentary real quick.
Yeah.
I've seen it. All right. Here's what I'll tell you. All right. Did you see the Arnold documentary or the 3-part miniseries?
No, I know Patrick says it's really good, but I haven't seen it.
So that is a 3-part miniseries. Each one's an hour. 1 hour is devoted to this, talking about Arnold now, devoted to his bodybuilding. 1 hour is devoted to his acting career, and 1 hour sort of devoted to his political career. And they're all kind of, there's like loose storylines that sort of connect all 3 episodes. Fascinating, really fascinating. And Arnold is incredibly candid in that. The Sylvester Stallone documentary I found to be really interesting. There was some things that I learned. I'll keep it spoiler free for you. The relationship he had with his parents, I found that to be a really fascinating sort of story. But I will tell you this. When it was over, I remember, because my girlfriend is a huge Sylvester Stallone fan as well, we watched it together. And when it was over, she said, "That was great." And I said, "That just scratched the surface of Sylvester Stallone." I mean, there's this whole part where it's like he does amazing in the 90s, then he does Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, Oscar, career kind of falls down a little bit, and then completely glosses over the 90s with the exception of Copland, and then goes to Rocky Balboa. And I don't want to say anything more than that. It was good. It needed to be an hour and a half longer. It needed to be 3 hours in length. That's my
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been hearing. I would recommend Rocky versus Drago.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
And if your listeners haven't seen that, I don't think that I take that back. I would not recommend Rocky versus Drago, his cut, but I would recommend the hour and a half or whatever documentary about him making his director's cut of Rocky 4, because it's such a fascinating movie, because listening to him and his talking about the changes he's making and why he's making them, it's fascinating hearing a director's process, and everything he's saying, he's so convincing. You're just like, yes, that sounds better. And then you watch the movie and you're just like, this is so much worse. And I just find it so interesting. But the thing that I love about Stallone is he's such a smart guy and a really interesting guy, and a skillful filmmaker who's not afraid of making kind of crazy decisions. There's nothing really vanilla about his work. And I would love to see like a De Palma type of documentary just about the movies he's that he's directed and starred in, but not just the ones that he starred in.
Okay, excellent. All right, so that was Patrick's 2014 Gone Girl. Adam, your 2015 movie.
So my 2015 movie is a movie that I loved at the time, and I wish I had the courage to have put it on my top 10 list, but I didn't. Because it wasn't until like 2017 where I was just like, fuck it, and I put like Wish Upon on my top 10 list, and that's when I finally, turned into the supreme being that I am today.
Achieved your true form.
Yeah, exactly. But the movie in 2015 that I wish I did is The Intern, the Nancy Meyers workplace comedy with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. I think it's one of the best Anne Hathaway performances that she's ever given. And that's saying something, because I think she's consistently great. But the thing that her and De Niro have such a great interplay and relationship in that movie. It's like chemistry without you like suspecting that they would have chemistry together. And De Niro is so warm and funny and it's in a comedy, and it's not like he's going for like broad Fokker laughs and stuff like that. It's just kind of like really subtle, and he's just a good man, and he's got a lot of wisdom to impart, and it's sort of like him addressing sort of the workplace generation gaps about professionalism and about like kind of how to treat clients and how to think about things as a business, as a strategy, and not just kind of be like into your own business. But the thing I think that the movie does so well that doesn't get enough credit for is I'm all for, and I want to be very clear on this, I'm all for positive depictions of powerful women in movies. And I think it's gotten better, especially in the past 10 years. But I think that it's not normal women. I think it's like you put them in a superhero suit and that makes them powerful, or it has to be some kind of like a fictional status. But the thing that's so impressive is Anne Hathaway's character in The Intern is the CEO of her own company that she built up from the ground up. And I have been in corporate America for the past 20 years, and I've seen how exceptional female executives are, and just kind of how they go about their business and their influence. But yet they're, a lot of them are just so humble and down to earth and everything like that, but just so hardworking. And then they balance like, motherhood on top of it. And then like a lot of, other interests and things like that. And Anne Hathaway depicts that better than I've seen in a lot of movies. And I think these are the types of women that we should be propping up as heroes, and not as much. And I'm using this as an easy target just because the movie's out now. Then like Rachel Zegler in The Hunger Games, or like a Brie Larson in The Marvels and stuff like that. Like I don't see how anybody really can kind of watch that and be like, rah, rah, girl power. I feel so much more, better about myself because I saw somebody shoot a fucking rainbow out of their fingers or something like that. Like, but if I'm watching Anne Hathaway in The Intern, or I'm watching who's just like, vulnerable, but like remains unflappable in that vulnerability. She pushes forward, even though she's like allowed to have her feelings behind closed doors and things like that. And her life is tough, but she's just like talented and smart, and like she's going to succeed. I would rather see that, and I would rather see like Taylor Swift at the top of her powers and like the Eras tour and stuff like that, than kind of this faux, girl power type of stuff. So I think The Intern is underrated in that regard, but even aside from that, it's just such a breezy Nancy Meyers type of movie that it's so easy to put on and just enjoy.
Well, that is a movie that I've added to my list because, in fact, although I've heard of it and I remember when it came out, it's just one that I hate to use the term fell through the cracks, but for whatever reason, I didn't see it, but you have sold me on it. Sold. So, Patrick, your thoughts on The Intern from 2015?
I also have not seen The Intern, and it's been on my list for years, specifically because of Adam's love for it. Because the marketing didn't really make me want to see it, even though I kind of like Nancy Meyers movies, but I think her movie right before this was It's Complicated, and I didn't love that movie. And then The Intern, and I was like, oh, here's De Niro in comedy mode, and that rarely spells success. But I was wrong about the marketing based on what I know and what Adam has said. We own a Blu-ray of it. I still haven't watched it. I wanted to watch it because I knew it was going to be on Adam's list prior to this recording, and I just did not get a chance. So I for sure need to see it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Patrick, a question I've been dying to ask you for several years, and every time I hear you mention that you bought a Blu-ray or you have a Blu-ray, I always, in the back of my mind, say the next time you're talking to him, ask him this question. How many movies do you think you own?
I have no idea.
Okay. Hundreds? In the thousands?
It's in the thousands.
It's in the thousands.
Yeah. I hesitate to get a real count because I think it would depress me, because I would be like, what have I done with my life? Or like I would start thinking about the money that went into that. And a lot of them I got for free because I used to review movies.
Sure.
And so it's not all money spent, but it is too much money spent on movies. And I don't want to be the guy who like fetishizes physical media, which is like a new kind of online guy. And I rarely will like brag about my collection on social media, which I see a lot of people do. It's just like, it's for me, it's not for other people. But I like, when Adam and I go to do these shows where like we're going to talk about 10 movies, I like that I can go down to the basement and pull 9 of them.
Yeah.
But I do not have an exact count. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay. And I'm not going to get on the high horse of the physical media guy, but if one thing I've learned over the past few years is if you physically own a copy of a movie, you own that movie. Otherwise, you own a digital license to a film that I feel like at some point could be taken away from you. So,
yeah.
And so that's why, my most important films, Jaws and certain other films, I have on every format they've ever come out, because these are movies I'll always want to make sure that I have. But I've always been curious, and that's a great answer to your question, and I appreciate that. So your 2015 movie.
My 2015 movie was my favorite movie of 2015, and it's a movie I still think is underrated, even though it comes from probably one of the most celebrated living filmmakers, and that is Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, which I get why people don't like, because it's long and it's incredibly nasty and mean-spirited. It's not my favorite Tarantino movie, but as of now, it's probably the one I've seen the most times, because I'll watch it 2 to 3 times a year. As soon as it gets cold, as soon as it snows for the first time, right around the holidays, I'm always putting on The Hateful Eight. It's a movie that I love to live in, even though, like I said, it's very angry and mean-spirited. I think it says some really harsh but true things about the state of race relations in our country, about the state of men and women in our country. It's telling that the thing that bonds the races at the, near the end of the movie is hanging a woman. It usually gets placed at or near the bottom of people's Tarantino rankings. I think it's a legitimate American masterpiece.
And I will completely agree with you. But with a caveat of, when I saw this movie, famously leaked online, if you recall, like this was a big deal.
Scripted, right?
Well, not only the script, but
the movie itself,
an Oscar screener had famously kind of leaked online. And I didn't watch it that way, but I remember some friends of mine telling me, hey, listen, you can watch The Hateful Eight right now. Don't go to the theater. I'm like, no. This is something I really want to see on the big screen. I didn't get a chance to see it in 70 millimeter roadshow, the way that it's meant to be seen, but I still saw it in the theater. But when I left the theater the first time I saw the film, I think I left a little more confused than I expected to be. And that's going to be kind of a pattern for certain Tarantino films for me. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the same way, because I think I have certain expectations for a Quentin Tarantino film. And when I don't get those expectations, it takes my brain a couple days to process. But I would put The Hateful Eight at a top 3 Tarantino film for me, easily. And I'll say this because I want to be very careful in how I say this. I think it has some of the most interesting characters and performances of any of the Tarantino films, period. There's, quote unquote, 8 different characters. Not one of them is similar to the other. They're all so uniquely different. And you, again, be careful how I say this. You're interested to spend more time with each of these characters to learn a little bit more about who they are, because they're compelling on screen. Dare I say, some of them are charismatic on screen, but again, I want to say that very carefully, because everything you said about the film is 100% true. It's a mean-spirited movie. But for a Tarantino film, I think it has the least amount of action, and sort of, when the violence kicks in, it is violent, but it is what, by all definitions, a slow burn movie. And I think it's easily his most watchable film. So I agree with you 100%. Adam, your thoughts on The Hateful Eight?
Yeah, I for whatever reason, even though it's kind of a thornier movie for him, I saw it in theaters 7 times.
Wow.
Like, I remember that winter, all I wanted to do was watch The Force Awakens and Hateful Eight. And that was it. So I just went back to see one or the other all the time. And I still kind of, if I'm going to sit down and watch it, I will watch it roadshow way because I know where the stop was. And then I'll listen to the Crystal Gale song and I'll come back to it 10 minutes later. And yeah, it's a movie that's hard to like embrace fully like you could with Jackie Brown or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But it has, he was on the precipice of something that I don't think that I knew was in the air yet. That would surely come to fruition in 2016 in the world. And I think that the movie's only kind of grown more powerful because of it. The fact that he's able to do it as sort of like an Agatha Christie mystery. And, you know, even though the characters are despicable, it's almost like watching like a Steven Seagal movie where you're just like, yeah, well, I'm not rooting for any of them, but I can enjoy like these performances, I guess. And yeah, your enjoyment doesn't mean like you're endorsing any of the behavior or anything like that. So it's a tough movie. It's like a complex movie, but it's also, like you guys both said, it's very watchable. It's very important. And yeah, it's something that I think is one of his few movies where I feel like I haven't fully cracked it yet, even though I've seen it so many times. Like, I feel like with more viewings, I'm going to get more and more different things out of it. Whereas if I'm watching Pulp Fiction, even though it's like my third favorite movie, I'm pretty sure I've gotten everything that I'll get from Pulp Fiction.
So it's like Walton Goggins in The Hateful Eight is one of the most despicable human beings ever. Mm-hmm. Yet you find yourself rooting for him at the end, is like, oh, because he's kind of cracked the case. I'm keeping this somewhat spoiler free. And you almost want to see these guys succeed. And then you have to kind of mentally check yourself and go, wait a second, he's awful. They're all awful. Don't root for these guys to come out in the end.
Yeah. And it just kind of also shows that there's no person who's only one thing all the time.
Right.
There's people who are, you know, different variations of, you know, like just like a Kurt Russell's character. It's just like he's very liberal in the sense of like how he, you know, sort of, you know, treats the Samuel L. Jackson character. But then once he feels bruised by it, it turns ugly very quickly. And then like his treatment of women is horrible all the time. So it's like this person who's kind of the so-called like good white guy, like, is bad too. And then Walton Goggins is just like, you know, the person that you're just like, I would never want to associate with this guy, but then he's smart. You can't deny that. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah. Patrick, I'll ask you this quick question. I've actually never sat down and watched the extended version of this that's available on Netflix. Can you speak to that at all?
I have. I don't like it. It's meant to be a movie. It's not meant to be broken up into 4 episodes. There was a little bit of new stuff, but honestly, it's not worth it to me, given the way that they break the movie up. The roadshow version or the watching it all the way through, that's definitely the way to go.
The Netflix version's bizarre because they play the opening credits before every chapter.
Right.
And I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Yeah.
And Tarantino signed off on that.
Yeah. He's a weirdo. He's a weirdo.
Yeah. He had some kind of like, he was pretty pro Netflix for a little while. And it seems like that kind of went away. But
yeah.
All right. So Adam, you're 20, and Patrick, guys, great picks on those ones. Adam, we're on 2016 now.
I'm going to go with 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Okay.
Which is a movie that I was really impressed by opening night when I saw it. And then I didn't see it for a long time, but I revisited it 2 years ago during Scary Movie Month. And was just, I thought it was even better than I remembered. And the thing that I like so much about it is it works as like, if this were the Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt, you would be talking about this as one of the best episodes of that series to your friends. And it works as, you know, just kind of this chamber drama, sort of like a stage type of thing with people huddled together in a bunker against their will, some of them against their will. and they kind of build this surrogate family. And then the thing that I love about it is it it promises something, and then when, spoiler, I guess, when like the third act develops, it over delivers on the thing that it was promising. And there's some creatures and things like that, and they're so bizarre that it's frightening because of it. It's not just like sort of like this weird like monster. It's like, what if a dog had diamond skin? It's just like, it's like, what the fuck? And it's just, that's always the scariest thing, where it's just like, what if this plant had teeth and eyeballs and stuff like that? It's like, I'm thinking of the ruins and stuff like that. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that's scary. It's like the thing that you're used to, and then it kind of is just a little bit off, and not just kind of born out of whole cloth. But the thing also that's so nice about 10 Cloverfield Lane is this is the movie that really convinced me that in a different era of movie star era, Mary Elizabeth Winstead would be the next Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
I think that she is so good in this sort of action heroine type of role. And I think she taps into it a little bit, but like, I think that, yeah, in a different time period, like she would be, getting the roles that Sigourney Weaver did. And yeah, I don't know. It's not the type of movie where I like find a whole lot of deeper meaning in or anything like that, but just kind of as a enjoyable genre exercise, I think it's pretty fantastic.
So when I saw the movie, and maybe you guys can speak to this or not, this movie was not originally written as a sequel to Cloverfield. Is that from what I understand? Or it was kind of a spec script, or it was something, and they kind of said, let's put the Cloverfield name on it. I think that's what I read.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't quote me on that. But I'm watching this film, and I didn't see it in the theater. I did see it either video on demand, or it had to have been. I don't think video stores were around, so it had to have been video on demand when I watched this. But I really enjoyed the film, although I felt like it was going to be a movie that was going to have sort of an ambiguous ending. Like, I don't know what's really going on. And then, like the way you described it, Adam, is sort of oh, no, this is everything you thought it was going to be, and substantially more. But I remember the first time watching it, for the first two acts, kind of settling into, well, this is going to be super ambiguous the way the movie ends. No, not the case. So yeah, I right there with you. I thought it was a really enjoyable film. Patrick?
Yeah, I also like that it's kind of got a double threat, where it's like you think that she's in the clear because she, triumphed over one antagonist, and then it's just like you open the door and you think like it's going to be like, a certain new Saw movie where the sun is shining and everything's okay. But that's not the case. It's like a double ending. Or a double climax. It's like Aliens, where it's just like, no, you still have work to do.
Patrick, your thoughts?
That was one of my favorite things about it when I saw it, was that I think as moviegoers, we've just grown so accustomed to sort of the turn of the screw ending, where it's just like, well, I don't know. What do you think happened? And I think about a movie like, and I'm going to spoil a little bit of a Kevin Smith movie called Red State, which sets up something and then chickens out at the last minute and is like, it backs away from it. And I always kind of steel myself against the feeling that that's going to happen again. I mean, it's happened more than in just Red State. It's happened in a lot of movies, but 10 Cloverfield Lane, I was kind of steeling myself against it because, again, 3/4 of the movie is so compelling that you don't even technically need the last quarter to feel like you got your money's worth. But the fact that the movie decides to put its money where its mouth is and go where it kind of promises to go, I give it so much credit for it, because so many movies chicken out, and I as somebody who used to listen to the Slash Filmcast, I was familiar with Dan Trachtenberg as a guest and as a movie fan, and I was really rooting for him when 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, because this was sort of his debut feature, and I was like, I want to see if this guy can make a movie, and boy can he. He's only made the two. He made this and Prey, which I also really liked. I'm excited to see where he goes next. I like Cloverfield a lot. I might like 10 Cloverfield Lane better. And I think this could have been sort of an amazing, almost anthology series, like Adam was saying, like the Twilight Zone, had they not made the Cloverfield paradox.
Yeah. So
I have a theory that they could keep going right now and people would ignore the Cloverfield paradox.
No, you're probably right.
I will say this to touch on something you said, Patrick. I wasn't able to pinpoint it until you actually said it, but when referring to Red State, it's kind of shocking that the guy that made Dogma chickened out on the ending of Red State. And I'll keep that super spoiler free, but I know exactly what you're talking about when Goodman gives his monologue at the end, sort of the debrief explaining what happened. I remember having this utter like, oh, really? Sort of. So it's ironic that the guy who made Dogma would chicken out on something like that.
And speaking of John Goodman, his performance in 10 Cloverfield Lane is like maybe a top 5 John Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good pick there. All right. So, Patrick, to you for 2016.
I'm going to go with the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar, a movie that I keep championing as a sneaky Coen brothers masterpiece. I think it failed to make much of an impression when it came out because it is so episodic and it is so weird and esoteric. It has this amazing cast that I think got people into the theater, and they're like, well, Channing Tatum sings and dances, and Scarlett Johansson does a mermaid number, and there were lots of reasons for people to want to go see it, but the temperature on the movie at the time was pretty cold. I don't hear it talked about that much, but I think it's one of their best movies of the last decade, if not more. It's one of my favorites of theirs. I think it has a lot to say, not just about the history of Hollywood, but I think it has a lot to say about faith and organized religion and who we choose to serve. I think the Josh Brolin character, Eddie Mannix, I think is one of their best characters, and they write great characters just like Tarantino. Like they often get Tarantino and the Coen brothers kind of get labeled as writers of great dialogue, but I don't think it's the dialogue. I think it's the people saying the dialogue. I think it's their characters that they write that make their movies so special and so memorable. And I think Hail Caesar, top to bottom, is amazing characters. Even Jonah Hill, who has one scene, creates this amazing character in the span of less than 5 minutes. Because he meets the legal definition of personhood, and that's a joke that I just will never tire of. I think it's a very funny movie. I show it a lot of semesters in my film class. It is always met with head scratching and sometimes anger. Someday I feel like I will be vindicated, and this movie will be recognized as being great.
It's interesting because is it safe to say that no two Coen brothers films are alike? They're all pretty different. I mean, you can always expect something very, something you've never seen before as far as characters. I can certainly speak to that. I say all this because there are two Coen brothers films that I have not seen. Hail Caesar is one of them, and Inside Llewyn Davis is the other. Those are the two Coen brother movies that for some reason, that's just the gap in their filmography. Can't tell you why I haven't. I love the Coen brothers movies, but this is going on my list, and is something that I'm going to try to watch at some point this week. And I have no excuse, Patrick, for why I haven't seen this film. I'm a big fan. Adam, I'll just defer to you on your thoughts on Hail Caesar.
Yeah, I have a weird relationship with the Coen brothers, where sometimes I feel like I'm not smart enough for the Coen brothers.
That was me with a Serious Man.
Okay, I think I got A Serious Man maybe just because of the Judaism stuff, like ingrained in my background.
Hold that over me.
Just kind of like the vibe of it. I kind of got it. I don't know. I was just tuned into the wavelength already, but I find their dramas more accessible than their comedies by and large, or their crime movies, I guess, crime dramas more than their comedies. Um, because I think that I can tap into the themes of what's going on a little bit easier. With the comedies, I almost always am just like, I enjoy the performances. This is breezy. This is funny. Or most of the time, I'm like that. There's a few that just don't work with me, but I feel like I have to do extra work to kind of crack like what they're getting at. And I think I have that a little bit with Hail Caesar. Like I almost want Patrick to write like a cliff notes for me on Hail Caesar a little bit. But that's not to say I don't like the movie. There's stuff in it that I really enjoy. Like just as a comedy, I really like it. And I find it very entertaining. And I will follow the Eddie Mannix character into any movie. I love Alden Ehrenreich's kind of just, sweetie pie, like movie star cowboy. So I mean, like I really enjoy it a lot. But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because their comedies are sort of, and I don't mean this as a negative term. They feel sort of aloof to me in a way that I just, because I'm such at heart a sincere person, I have trouble finding my way to sometimes. So, like, or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or Hail Caesar, like the first times I see them, I'm just kind of like, I'm pretty sure I did not get that. Like, I like some stuff in it, but I'm pretty sure like what they're going for, it's going right over my head. So, I think I'm close with Hail Caesar, but I need a couple more viewings of it to really fully embrace it.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I'm putting that one on the list. So perfect. So Adam, we're going to you for 2017.
Okay, so I hate to repeat sort of with the same actor, but I'm a card-carrying member of the Anne Hathaway fan club, so I will go with Nacho Vigalando's Colossal, which was my number one movie of that year. It was a movie I remember having at number 7 on my top 10 list, and then I rewatched it the night before I did my top 10, and I'm like, oh no, it's number 1. And I love when that happens because sometimes a movie, reveals itself to you on the first viewing, and sometimes you have to let it kind of sit with you for a little while. And the thing that I love about that is it sort of came out right around the time of the deconstruction in society of the nice guy. And I had a little bit of an about face on that where I'm just kind of like, I always considered myself the nice guy, but like maybe I wasn't as nice as I thought that I was. And I'm not as bad as like Jason Sudeikis turns out in this movie because he's just like the epitome of the toxic nice guy. But I think that it's definitely a movie that it markets itself as this kaiju comedy, and Anne Hathaway is this, fuck up who has like a drinking problem, and you think like she's the issue, and then you kind of learn that no, it's not her. It's like how everybody treats her for something that's a disease that she suffers with. And I think it's really smart about how it repurposes a kaiju movie to be a comment about alcoholism. It repurposes kaiju to be a statement about toxic masculinity. And it just builds into something where you think it's going to be kind of like this Sundancey lark into something really heavy and poignant and rewarding by the end. It's a movie that like just grows and grows and grows, where it becomes like this just beautiful cinematic experience by the end of it, when you're just kind of expecting like kind of a silly, quirky, indie comedy at the beginning.
I will be the first to admit, watching that film, that I couldn't get the allegories. I couldn't pick up initially the way you sort of described it. I didn't know what I was getting myself into because I didn't know if this was sort of a play on a parody of Pacific Rim. I didn't get it the first time. And I remember you mentioning this, going back to 2017 on F This Movie, mentioning this film and sort of having a better understanding of it. Having said all that, I have not revisited the film, but I have nothing but the utmost respect for, what they were attempting to do with that film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Patrick?
And I also liked just kind of the twist on Sudeikis's persona, because I always found him to be, up to that point, I didn't think that he was knowing enough about his smugness on screen. And I think that this movie sort of weaponizes it in a really interesting way.
Yeah, that's exactly the word I was going to use. Is it weaponizes Jason Sudeikis in a really interesting way, because he's made a couple of like straightforward romantic comedies.
Mhm.
Sleeping with Other People, is that what the one I'm
Yep.
thinking of?
Yeah.
And he's good and he's likable, but yeah, for Nacho Vigalondo to sort of recognize the darkness that's there in Jason Sudeikis is so smart. I Nacho Vigalondo is one of those guys who's like every movie I will see, who's every movie I want to love, and then I rarely do. I'm always like, well, that was interesting, or that had some ideas, but Colossal is the one where it really all comes together.
Mhm.
Great performances, a great central conceit, just this idea that Anne Hathaway is controlling this kaiju monster. And I went into it expecting that as sort of this the kaiju monster as a metaphor for her being a disaster in everyone's lives. And so for it to kind of take the turn that it does and become about something different, I was like, oh, that's super interesting, because you already have this high concept that you could have just seen through to the end, but instead you want to be about more. And it's the first and maybe still only movie that really gets to the heart of a certain kind of guy who really exists, in the online space, but everywhere in the world. And it's interesting that some of these movies that we're talking about, I think, came out like a year or two early. Hateful Eight, I think, was a couple years too early. Colossal comes out right around like Me Too, right? Isn't it kind of starting or kind of going right about now?
Yeah,
2017?
it came out in like the spring of 2017, and like the Harvey Weinstein Me Too stuff, I believe, was the fall of
Yeah, it was around November of 2017 when all that started kicking off.
So it's like a couple months too early. Not that it's a movie about Me Too, but it is very much about Me Too. I mean, it's like it's about.
Well, it's also about how men, for no reason, feel like they can lord over how women should behave and what they're allowed to do with their bodies,
Right.
and how, yeah, it's that, and they always like kind of code it in, I'm just a nice guy and I'm trying to help you, and like, why won't you accept my help, and dot dot dot, why won't you accept my love, and things like that. And, yeah, it's just so smart about it. Where one thing, it kind of reminds me of this, like, there's a movie called Stone with Robert De Niro and Edward Norton and Mila Jovovich that came out, I think, in like 2008 or something like that. And that movie really made me appreciate De Niro in a different way, because there's no better actor at like masking layers of ugliness with a sheen of civility, and like, I'm kind of the upright citizen, but like if you prod him just a little, it's like vile. And I think that that's what Colossal does also really well, is just like, this whole thing is just, it's play, it's acting, it's like not who these guys are, and I don't even know if they know that, and like, and if they do know that, it's so, they're so far gone that it's even worse and everything like that. But it's just like a really heady, interesting movie about a lot, and it's great that it was sort of a surprise, because otherwise, I think if they marketed it as what it is, it might seem too didactic. But like, you kind of coming to it along the way kind of helps the movie a bit, because it feels sort of like a surprise.
Okay, awesome, perfect. All right, so Patrick, your 2017.
My 2017 is also a movie about toxic masculinity. Go figure. That is Sofia Coppola's remake of Don Siegel's The Beguiled, a movie that again snuck up on me. I didn't see it theatrically. I so wish I would have. I caught up with it on Blu-ray and liked it. I thought it was pretty. And then as the years went on, it stuck with me in a way that I didn't expect it to. And then I would revisit it a couple times a year, and I was like, oh, this is actually a great movie. Um, I thought the idea of her remaking The Beguiled was really interesting on paper because the Don Siegel movie with Clint Eastwood is so much about toxic masculinity, but it's told by some toxic men. It's told by Don Siegel and Clint Eastwood. So the idea of Sofia Coppola coming at it from a female perspective, I thought was really interesting. She has this amazing cast of Nicole Kidman and Kirsten Dunst and Colin Farrell and Elle Fanning. It's so beautiful to look at. It's all photographed in like natural light and candlelight. The performances are wall to wall great. Speaking of weaponizes, it's another movie that is really smart in the way that it weaponizes what I think a lot of people associate with Nicole Kidman, which is a kind of coldness. Mm-hmm. And a sort of repression. I mean, she's played this kind of part a number of times. I'm thinking of like The Others, and there's a handful of movies. I didn't expect it to be as good as it is because it is a remake of a movie I really, really like. But I think if you put both of them in front of me, I would prefer to watch the Sofia Coppola version, even though I love the Don Siegel one.
If I'll ask for myself and for anyone that maybe hasn't seen the movie, talking about the original and the remake, the spoiler-free kind of plot of the movie is
a soldier is injured and finds himself in a house full of women, and begins to flirt with and or hook up with and or manipulate several of them.
Okay. So Don Siegel, director of Dirty Harry?
Dirty Harry.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. This is a movie that he made with Eastwood after Dirty Harry or before Dirty Harry?
Ooh, I believe it's after.
Okay. All right. And so I remember hearing about The Beguiled, but I had never seen the original and had not seen the Sofia Coppola version of the film. So if you were to say, Dana, you should watch this one first, which one would you recommend?
I'm sorry, just to answer your question real quick, they came out the same year. They're both 71.
Both 71.
Dirty Harry and The Beguiled. I would honestly say start with the Don Siegel one.
Okay.
Because I think it lays the groundwork for the story in an interesting way, and I think it's the way that the story is remembered and was sort of socially acceptable for 40 years. And then I think it's interesting to see Sofia Coppola riff on that with a much more sort of modern feminist perspective.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Adam, your thoughts on The Beguiled?
Yeah, I saw it opening night. I'm a huge Sofia Coppola fan. I remember I did myself a disservice of reading too much about it before seeing the movie. So it's not like I knew what the plot, beats were, but I had read that they shot the movie in the mansion that they shot like some of the Beyonce's Lemonade videos. And the whole time I just kept thinking it was a Beyonce music video. And I was just like, come on, ladies, let's get in formation. And it's like, that's not the way that you want to be watching a movie about feminism. So I did go back. They at the Music Box locally, a rep theater in the Chicago area. They did a Sofia Coppola series, so I revisited a lot of her movies. The Beguiled was one of them, and I liked it a lot more on the second viewing. I think for me, it's not one of my favorites of hers, but I do love a lot of the performances in it, and I think that it's a beautiful looking movie and it's a haunting movie. It's got just some real great mood setting. And one thing I'm not sure if we talked about is there's also not just a male-female dynamic that's kind of at odds with each other, but also Colin Farrell's character in the Sofia Coppola movie is a runaway soldier from the North, and he's holed up in a mansion basically with Southern belles. So
Okay.
there's a lot of tension there in, you know, there's troops that like do patrols and like the women could give him up at any time. And he sort of has to like, as Patrick mentioned, manipulate and curry favor with them, but not like get too involved with one or the other because it might, cause them to be jealous of one another. And some of the women see him as an escape, and some of the women see him as like somebody that they can sleep with because they're sort of like pent up and their sexuality is burgeoning and things like that, and they're lonely. So I think it's a real interesting movie. I love the Sofia Coppola movies that I think are more like young person writing in a diary. And I think that The Beguiled is one of her movies that feels much more kind of adult and has a lot more kind of thoughts and emotions that are more just grown up and complex and everything like that. So it's a really good movie, though.
Awesome. All right, perfect. So I'll just ask this question. Have either you or Patrick seen her latest movie, Priscilla?
Yeah, we both have.
Yeah, and that's right. Yep. So it's a ringing endorsement for both of you?
It's one of my favorites of the year.
Okay.
It's a recommendation for me. I want to see it again, but I did like it a lot.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. All right, so we're on to 2018. Adam?
Den of Thieves. Okay. A movie that I really didn't have any intention of seeing until I found out it was 2.5 hours long. And then I was just like, what the fuck? A 2.5 hour Gerard Butler movie? And like Pablo Schreiber or like Schreiner is like the co-lead. Schreiber.
Bro.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what? And then I found out, I don't know who said it, but like somebody said that it was Redbox Heat. And I was just like, well, I need that. And I watched it the opening weekend in a theater, and it was the action movie I had been wanting to see for several years that like just kind of didn't exist anymore. I found it so funny that like 50 Cent and Cheddar Bob are in it, but it's like they're treated with the importance and seriousness of Tom Sizemore or Danny Trejo and Heat and stuff like that. And I just think that it's such a fun movie. The Gerard Butler character it helped me unlock Gerard Butler as an actor or as a movie star, I guess, because I'd seen him in stuff where he's good before he was kind of, elevated to A-list status with 300. But this sort of was like, oh no, he gets it. Like he gets that he's kind of like, a sleazebag and stuff like that. And I think that he's so charismatic and entertaining in the Al Pacino type of proxy role in Den of Thieves. And just sort of, I think it's just compelling just to watch them kind of, plan out their heists and their business and stuff like that. And not to spoil anything, but I do love that the movie sort of lands on, they're kind of like buddies from an intramural soccer team. And it just sort of, I find it just charming that a bunch of bros are going to watch this in a theater and they're just like, man, we should fucking do a heist. We're buds. Yeah.
You're the reason I saw that movie, Adam. I remember hearing you talk about it, and I think I remember you reference it as Redbox Heat. And I remember going, well, Heat's one of my favorite movies of the 90s. I love Michael Mann movies. I love Heat. Heat's amazing. And then I watched it, and first of all, I was shocked at how similar it was to the movie Heat.
Right? I know it's not hiding it at all.
No. I mean, to be fair, Heat is actually a remake of a 1989 movie called L.A. Takedown that Michael Mann also wrote and directed. So I'm like, okay, so there's we can do this, we can get away with it. But long story short, I had a blast with the film. I really did. And it made me realize, especially at that time period, we're all of that age where we grew up on a steady diet of action movies from the 80s and the 90s. And frankly, most of those movies have started to disappear in a post-2008 world where, dare I say it, MCU and all that stuff has taken over, and that's what you're getting for your action movies, with the exception of the occasional Expendables films, which I still think are a bit cliche and a bit of a fad. This was just a good, it was an honest to goodness, just R-rated, nose to the grindstone, action film. And I loved it. And I realized that I'm going to always love these type of movies, and I need more of them. And I'm just sad that I don't get a lot of these in the theater, but I do see every Gerard Butler movie in the theater for some reason. I don't know why. I saw Plane in the theater, and I saw Plane in the theater, and it was packed. The theater was packed when I saw it.
I don't know who said it, but I remember there was a quote going around like a couple years ago, and it was like, we're here. It was like a filmmaker saying, like, we're here, we're on set, so why not just make it really good? And that's sort of how I felt about Den of Thieves. It's like if you had the movie Armored or the movie Takers, like a Screen Gems programmer, and it's like from day one and every day after, they're just like, what if we made this just like 25% better than that? And it paid off. It's a really, I think also just the surprise of it, it just disarms you. And you kind of rally around a movie that you just had low expectations of, or like a certain expectation of. And then you're just like, oh, they're really giving a shit. And like, you kind of are won over by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, on Den of Thieves.
I like this movie. I was kind of so on it the first time I saw it, and then I again find myself inclined to revisit it. And the last time I revisited it was like I was sick and I was awake all night, and so I watched the whole thing, and I was like, no, this movie's so entertaining. I love that somebody was like, what if we did Heat, but they were all pieces of shit? And I thought that was interesting. This is maybe my favorite Gerard Butler performance ever, and I think the action is really well done. I think there's a twist that I don't love, but whatever. I don't care. I like the actor involved with the twist. I like all the actors in the movie, really. It's really solid, and it's one of those movies that it's been cool to see people kind of discover since it came out. Because, I mean, it did okay when it came out, but it wasn't like a big blockbuster. And then slowly everyone has been like checking it out. Oh, and then it has developed enough of a following to where now there's a sequel that's coming out.
Yeah.
Which I'm on board for.
Yeah, it's also the type of movie that you can recommend to people at work, and that always comes in handy. Because like so often people will know that I'm like a movie person, and they're just like, hey, Adam, did you see that fucking Hangover movie? And it's just like, oh, God. Or like a VP will be like, what do you think of Now You See Me? And then I know I have to be like, oh, it's good. Because if I say it's a piece of shit, then like I'm not going to get into emerging leaders. So it's Den of Thieves is one where if somebody like gives me the shittiest movie and they like love it and they want to talk about it, I'd be like, man, have you seen Den of Thieves? And we can find common ground again.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like when somebody says to me, oh, you do a podcast all about movies, huh? Have you done an episode on the Boondock Saints? I'm like, no, not yet. But watch Den of Thieves if you want to see a good action movie. There you go. Perfectly said. So let's see. That means we're now on to... Wait, we're in 2018, right?
Yes.
All right, so we're to you now, Patrick, for your 2018.
Oh, boy. My last pick was a remake. My pick for this one is a remake. It's not one of my favorite movies of the year. Honestly, I only picked it because I feel like talking about this director, because he's in the public consciousness right now, because he has a movie out called Thanksgiving. I picked Eli Roth's remake of Death Wish, which is a largely ignored and in many ways justifiably ignored remake starring Bruce Willis and Elizabeth Shue. I think at the time everyone was looking for like Eli Roth to put his stamp on Death Wish. And he comes from horror and exploitation, and people were like, oh, he's going to make a really grimy, really sleazy throwback to Death Wish. And we kind of already got that with James Wan and Death Sentence. I think with some distance, I've come to appreciate Eli Roth's remake, and it's probably still my least favorite Eli Roth movie, which is to say I still like it. I don't think he's made a movie that I don't like, even though this one might be at the bottom. But I think some perspective is important. I think he was trying to direct it a little more anonymously. I think he was trying to prove that he could be kind of a journeyman for hire studio filmmaker and direct a star vehicle with some action and some thrills and some violence. And maybe build a career doing that. And there's lots of filmmakers who've done that I like. Eli Roth, I think, is better suited to making Eli Roth movies. And I think hopefully he's figuring that out. I mean, Thanksgiving suggests that he has, but I mean, then he made House with the Clock in Its Walls, and that is also sort of anonymous, but a good example of its genre. And Death Wish is just kind of like a decent example of its genre. Adam and I have talked before about the remake and suggested that it would be a better movie if Bruce Willis switched places with Vincent D'Onofrio, and if Vincent D'Onofrio was the lead of the movie instead of playing Bruce Willis's brother. And I fully support that idea, because I would believe Vincent D'Onofrio as a guy who goes crazy and starts murdering people, and Bruce Willis, it's a little harder to take. But I like this movie, and if I get two people to check it out, then I'll be happy.
And it's interesting because I'll just put just a little side story here. So my girlfriend and I just want to say, like, when we first started dating, people always like, how'd you know that you guys were going to end up in a pretty serious relationship? Well, the first time she invited me to her place, she was going to make dinner and we were going to watch a movie together. And as you know, we're kind of hanging out in her kitchen, and she's like, why don't you just put something on? Why don't you just put a movie on while I'm making dinner, and then we'll figure out what we're going to watch? And I'm like, well, what do you want to watch? She's like, I don't know. Why don't you put on Death Wish 3? And I said, oh, okay, well, this is the woman I'm going to end up marrying.
Did you propose?
I'm just saying, right then and there, I said, okay. And so that's, but we were, ironically enough, watching Death Wish 2 before I started recording this podcast with you.
Oh, wow.
And I say that because right before she put it on, I said, now this is the really heavy one. I said, this is the one that they haven't figured it out. Michael Winner hasn't figured it out yet. Like, it's pretty bad. I say that because I'm a big fan of the Death Wish series. Always have been. I think one of the reasons why the original Death Wish works so well is because Charles Bronson, yes, he was in, action films prior to that, but he sort of just has that appearance of sort of an everyman. Whereas Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis. Eventually you become too big of a movie star that you just see the actor, you never see the character. The Rock is always The Rock in whatever movie he's ever going to be in for the rest of from here till eternity. So that took me out of it just a little bit. I was expecting a far more gory film, a la Eli Roth. I hate to borrow your line, but it's fine. The Death Wish movie for me, it was fine. I saw it once in the theater. I left. I was like, oh, that was interesting. I've never revisited it, but I think I need to. I think I need to give it another watch. I didn't walk out of the theater going, well, that was awful, and that's not. It was what it was, and I can't sit here and say no, don't watch that film, because my reaction was I was thoroughly engaged the entire time I was watching the film. So I haven't thought of it since you brought it up, but I'm gonna watch it again.
Well, it is a little generic, and it shouldn't be, given the movie that it's remaking, given the auteur behind it. It should be something other than what it is, but after seeing it once and being sort of not moved by it, I did revisit it and was like able to appreciate it as kind of a slick piece of product,
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So I'm glad that you had sort of the same reaction your first time watching as I did. So I'm definitely, that's, I mean, her and I watch movies like this all the time. So tomorrow night, I'm just like, hey, we're watching the Bruce Willis Death Wish. That's going to be our Monday night movie. Adam, I know you guys have talked about this film before, but just to recap your thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't really a big fan of it, but I remember thinking there's a scene near the beginning where Bruce Willis, Elizabeth Shue, Vincent D'Onofrio, and I forgot what her name was. She's an actor who was dating Leonardo DiCaprio for a while. She's the Bruce Willis and Elizabeth Shue's daughter in that movie. They're in a restaurant, they're eating deep dish pizza. And I thought to myself, I want to see this movie. I want to see Deep Dish Pizza Lunch, the movie, with these 4 people. And then when Death Wish was happening, I was like, fuck, can I just watch Deep Dish Pizza, the movie? It doesn't matter who. Death Wish 3 is different because it's so bonkers.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the original Death Wish with Charles Bronson, but like Death Sentence, I'm glad Patrick brought that up, is one of the most challenging, hard to watch movies for me that I've ever seen. And Death Wish, I think I was relieved that it was more generic than Death Sentence in a weird way, because I just have trouble with any premise where it's like we're going to fridge the hero by killing the most adorable woman ever, whether it be Kelly Preston or Elizabeth Shue. And it's just like, the fun is gone. And unless you have something really profound to offer in return, I don't care to wallow in that movie's brand of ugliness. And I'm a hypocrite because there's other movies like where they're ugly, but they go for it, like The Mist or like Terrifier 2 and stuff like that. I've got no problem. It's just maybe a matter of tone. I don't know. Yeah, I would be interested to rewatch Death Wish more just to see it reframed with the new history of Bruce Willis and just kind of see if I would be more kind to it and find something out of it that I didn't at the time. Because one of the things I was talking about with Rob in like a reserve seating video a few weeks ago is like I was really hard on some of Bruce Willis's direct-to-video work because I chalked it up as something different than what the actual cause of what we saw on screen was. And I wonder if, it would reframe the movie in a way for me. But yeah, I mean, I like that Eli Roth is taking chances, that he's trying different stuff out, that he's not just, happy, or not that he needed to be unhappy with it, but that he wants to be a filmmaker of multiple genres and not just feel like he only can do horror when he has other interests. So yeah, I don't know. It's something I'll give another try, but yeah, it's not one of my movies, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, all right. So we're on to 2019. Adam?
I picked another movie that kind of snuck up on me where like I liked it opening night and then I put it away. And then I went back to it a couple of years ago and really liked it a lot more. And that is Alexander Aja's Crawl, which is just this really kind of tight, mean little thriller about a hurricane causing flooding. I think it's in Florida, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's in Florida. And then, alligators start kind of circling a house where Barry Pepper is kind of trapped in the basement. And then Kaya Scodelario is the daughter, and she has to, she's not hearing from her dad, and that's weird. So she goes to check up on him, and then she discovers him kind of trapped, on the basement level, and she's trying to free him. And then, 30 minutes into the movie, we see that he's kind of pinned down with alligators kind of on his tail, and it's just such a cool survival movie. And I really like movies that put you into that situation and you have to think along with the lead character of like, oh no, don't do that. Or this is what I would do. Or I have no idea how she did that. I could never do that. And things like that. And then it just builds to like some really clever stuff, like just really interesting set pieces where, you might see like a $200 million movie where, an entire city is on fire and like people are going through buildings and cars are jumping off of roofs and things like that. And you're just like zoned out. It's just like whatever.
Yeah.
But it's something in Crawl where it's just like, how do I trap an alligator into a shower? It's like riveting. And I love the dynamic between father and daughter. It's not something that you see all that often in a survival movie or a horror movie. And I love just kind of, like it's somebody who survives their ordeal, but like goes through a lot of, goes through hell and back to get through it and stuff like that. And it's just a cool movie. It's a really, really fun movie to watch.
I've actually never seen it, and it's just, I can't explain why. I live in Florida. Alligators are a real thing where I'm from. Anyone that lives here knows that literally any natural body of water in Florida, it could be a pond, it could be a lake, any of them, there's alligators in there. Now, you may not see them, but they're there. And, neighbors down the street had an alligator in their pool, 6 months ago. So and that might be one of the reasons why I didn't want to watch it, because I'm just like, that's a real thing for us here in Florida. Although, no, I don't know anyone who's actually ever been attacked by an alligator, so I'll just leave it there. But I haven't seen it yet, but based on your recommendation, I will give it a watch. Patrick.
Yeah, it's super good. It's I'm mixed on Alexander Aja. He'll make a movie like his Hills Have Eyes remake, and I'll be like, that was pretty good, and then he makes 3 in a row that I'm just like, I didn't really care for that. And then he comes out with Crawl, which it helps. He's working with Sam Raimi, and maybe he has a heavy producerial hand. But it goes back to what Adam was saying about Den of Thieves. It's just like, what if they sat down and said like, okay, we're going to make this movie about alligators in the basement. What if we made it really good? Yeah. And that doesn't happen enough anymore. I mean, this is a thing that we keep coming back to on if this movie, unfortunately, is talking about, kind of the state of modern movies. And it's not that anybody sets out to make a bad movie, but there's all these other concerns beyond the quality of the movie. Sometimes it's appealing to the right quadrants. Sometimes it's about just finishing the movie on time. Sometimes it's about satisfying shareholders. Sometimes it's about visual effects. But a lot of times you don't feel like somebody sat down and said, okay, but what if we made it really good? And in the case of Crawl, it really feels like every single aspect of that movie, people took their jobs really seriously and really wanted to do good work. And they do good work. It's a really good movie. That is a ringing endorsement from both of you. So I might add that to the top of the list of the movies.
I saw it opening night after seeing Stuber, and it made Crawl look even better. So I might recommend you do that. You watch Stuber, and then you will have no hope for movies, and then you'll watch Crawl, and it'll come right back to you.
I love that. That's awesome. So 2019, Adam. So 2019, Patrick.
My 2019 pick, I'm realizing that so many of my picks are movies that were not on my top 10 lists. They're movies that like I either want to talk about now or that I like more with some distance. It's Hustlers from 2019, the Lorene Scafaria movie about sort of based on a true story about some dancers at a strip club who start conning men out of money, basically by drugging them and stealing from them. I think part of it is because I was, deliberately trying to choose because my last movie was a fucking Eli Roth remake. I'm like, well, I should probably pick something directed by a woman. And part of it is because I rewatched Money Train a few days ago, and I've been on a real J-Lo high. And this, I think, is her best performance. A lot of people really thought she was going to be a lock for Best Supporting Actress for this movie. She's really terrific in it. I think the whole ensemble is very good. Constance Wu, Lily Reinhart, Kiki Palmer. I think they're all good at what they're asked to do. I think it's a really interesting movie. Again, sort of dealing with some of the fallout of Me Too. I think it's an even better movie about capitalism and sort of gig economy. Um, I think it has a lot to say inside of just being a pretty entertaining movie and featuring one of the funniest smash cuts in recent years where they accidentally inhale a bunch of drugs and pass out. It's a movie I like more the further away I get from it.
Okay, Hustlers. I'll add that to the list again. This is why I wanted you both on here, because I knew I was going to get some recommendations of some films that I hadn't seen yet. Remember the marketing campaign for this when it came out? I was still going to the movies a lot, even in 2019. That's on a subject I want to get to right now. I've been to the movies twice this year, so my disillusionment. I saw John Wick 4 and Oppenheimer in the theater.
Well, very good.
Good ones. Yeah.
I will admit the John Wick 4, the runtime did wear on me a little bit, but ironically, the Oppenheimer didn't. If that makes any
I could
sense.
see that.
With John Wick 4, it was just at one point, I kind of checked my watch and I'm like, all right, we're at the 2-hour, 10-minute mark, and he's getting into another skirmish, even though we know exactly where he has to go. And I was just like, it just eventually, I loved it, but it was just like, okay, I just got to. Look, the first John Wick movie is an hour and 37 minutes. Enough said. So,
if I could play devil's advocate about the runtime of John Wick Chapter 4, he's going through a lot for your entertainment value. The least you could do is sit in a chair and not complain about it, Dave. Like, where do you get off, maybe, is the question.
He said he's getting into another... And I had forgotten. I'd only seen John Wick 3 one time. I forgot about the bulletproof suits, and I was just like, "Oh, what's going on here? I must be missing something. Is he like supernatural or something?" And then it dawned on me that they had the bulletproof suits. So yeah. I was talking about how I remember the marketing campaign for Hustlers, but hadn't seen it yet. So, but perfect time to see what you thought about the movie, Adam.
I saw it once at the Alamo Drafthouse in LA, and it was right before I had to catch a flight home, and it was a red eye, and I remember being very distracted. So I liked Jennifer Lopez stripping to Fiona Apple. I thought that was cool. And then the rest of the movie happened, and I was thinking about when should I leave to go to LAX.
So the Alamo Drafthouse in relation to LAX is where?
I don't know, maybe like a half hour away.
Oh,
it's the Draft House is in downtown Los Angeles. And LAX is over in Inglewood.
Yeah, area. Well, that's drive. Depending on traffic, I'd stress out about that too. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm still going to watch Hustlers because it was a recommendation from Patrick. So I
watch it after Stuber.
I'm just going to watch Stuber every day this week.
Stuber as the aperitif to every movie. And then everything's going to seem great.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right, so now we're on to 2020. Let's see. I don't even want to get into the particulars of that one. I did an entire 3-month run of episodes called the Lockdown Sessions, which I believe both of you were a part of at one point, and I appreciate you guys being on there. It feels so long ago, yet it's so fresh in my memory, those 2020. It was a different time. Theaters were, for the most part, after March, closed for the rest of the year. We were privy to a lot of movies, day and date, through a lot of different streaming services. So there was a lot to choose from in 2020. But Adam, I'll go with you with your 2020 pick.
I picked Let Him Go, which is a thriller with Diane Lane and Kevin Costner and Leslie Manville. And the plot of that one basically is Diane Lane and Kevin Costner's son dies in a freak accident. He has a child with a woman that they don't know very well. And then the woman sort of gets forced by her matriarch and family to live with them and bring the kid with them and cut out the Diane Lane and Kevin Costner characters. They basically lay claim to both the daughter and their grandson. And the Leslie Manville character and Jeffrey Donovan's her son and stuff, that family is like the epitome of evil. It's just evil personified. And Diane Lane and Kevin Costner have to figure out a way to rescue their grandson from turning into these people and just from having to live with them. And it is such a primal experience as a movie. It's something where you see this sweet kid and like these grandparents that just love their grandson so much and they miss their son. And like, this is kind of like their way of keeping their son alive in small part. And they just know from the outset that there's something wrong with this extended family and that they have to bring their grandson back and raise them themselves. And it's just sort of like that classic, like Heart of Darkness type of thing where like you have to go to hell and back in order to save a loved one. And as I mentioned before, I mean, it's just such a primal experience. Like Diane Lane and Kevin Costner are so great as heroic figures to root for. It is one of those types of movies where like maybe like a Death Wish where you kind of as an audience member get like sort of a bloodlust where you're just kind of like, fuck these people up, get them out of there. So it's just a really tight, exciting, scary thriller, and I think it features like some of the best work of like Diane Lane and Kevin Costner's careers. So I think it's very underseen. It kind of got buried because of 2020. It played in theaters, but then like was one of those movies that kind of came out on VOD like 3 weeks later. But I haven't heard many people talk about it since then, and I think that it's sort of like an unsung movie of the decade.
I briefly remember the film, but obviously for obvious reasons, it just got lost in the sea of everything that was going on in 2020 and hadn't even thought about the film until you mentioned it. For some reason, I still picture the movie poster, which just has, Kevin Costner and Diane Lane on it looking distraught, if I remember. Yeah.
They have good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, your thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, the poster doesn't do this movie justice. The title doesn't really do this movie justice. COVID certainly didn't do this movie justice. It's so good. I just checked. It's actually streaming on Freevee if anybody wants to watch it with commercials, which is not ideal because it is a very tense movie and you don't want that broken up by like commercials for some fucking pharmaceutical. But it is such a good movie. And I completely agree that Costner and Diane Lane are so good in it. I remember watching it with Erica, my wife, and both of us, her especially, she gets very into movies and she was like freaking out near the end because it's so tense. It's one of these movies that like, we just talked about this last week on our Meet Joe Black episode where Meet Joe Black and Collateral, and I would include Let Him Go on that list where it's like, it opens with this relationship and the actors are so good and their relationship is so compelling that I just want to watch that movie. And you kind of forget that like, oh, we have to get into this whole like get the baby back plot line, which is great and super compelling. But like, it's a testament to just how good Diane Lane and Kevin Costner are that I could just watch a movie about them being married and him trying not to smoke. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't remember it too well. I remember that they do have like a lot of cool examples of like a marriage at play where it's, I think it's drinking, not smoking.
Is it drinking? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's drinking. But there's a lot of stuff where it's like they both agree on like the end goal. They need to get this kid back, but they don't agree like on the way to do it.
Right.
And like and they have like scenes where they're in a hotel room and they're waiting for something, or they're like scheduled to go over there. And it's just like, well, what do I do when this happens? Or like, why would you do it that way? Or if you do it that way, then this is going to happen next and stuff like that. And the thing that's so exciting about it is the moment you get into that house, it's like the quote where Mike Tyson once said, like, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And then it's just like, once you get into that house, it's just like, oh, fuck, like anything could happen.
Awesome.
It's really good.
Oh, I'm excited to watch that one. So that's Let Him Go. That's your 2020 pick. Patrick, your 2020 pick.
I feel bad because Adam keeps suggesting really good movies, and then I keep suggesting movies that only I like, and he has to like field it and be like, I don't know, it's not for me, but whatever. Patrick, he doesn't want to shit on my pick, so he's just like,
what do you got, buddy?
Tenet. I got Tenet. A movie that I think
got lots to say about that. Yeah,
done super dirty by COVID. I think had it been released under normal circumstances, it would have been a big hit. I think it's one of Christopher Nolan's most flawed movies. I'm not making a case for it as a masterpiece or even a sneaky masterpiece, but I do think it's good and underseen. I think in a lot of ways it's his most personal movie. Because it's really just about being a Christopher Nolan movie. And I like when filmmakers do that. I remember seeing Black Hat by Michael Mann and reviewing it and just calling it Michael Mann porn. And Tenet is Christopher Nolan porn. It's just him doing a riff on James Bond and messing around with chronology and editing and high science fiction concepts, and it's all this stuff that he's interested in a movie that's a little bit inscrutable. I've seen it a couple times, and I won't pretend to fully understand all of it. I get enough of it that I can follow it, but it says something that I want to keep going back to it. And it bums me out that I never got to see it in a theater. I know Adam saw it in a weird circumstance that I'll let him explain, but someday I hope to like show this for like a smash cut screening just so I can see it in a theater, because I never have.
So I had one of those. Okay, I'm not going to get into the politics of 2020. All I'm going to say is I live in the state of Florida. So if you understood what was going on in America in 2020, you understood that whatever preventative measures were put in place in Florida, they lasted for about 3 days and then they were just yanked. So when Tenet hit movie theaters, it was playing at my local Regal Cinema. And I braved, this was August of 2020, and I put a mask on and made the trip to the theater, to the IMAX theater, and had it almost to myself. I think there was one other person sitting in a 300-seat auditorium on the other end. So I saw this opening day in the theater and immediately can verify that the audio issues were real and present, especially in IMAX. Having said that, I left the theater really kind of like, well, that was cool. Can't wait to see that again. And then it was quickly yanked from theater, so I didn't get an opportunity to see it again. But I sat on that movie from August all the way to December when it finally kind of got like a VOD and ended up on HBO Max, and couldn't talk to anyone about it for like 3 months. And that was one of the most frustrating, 3 months for a movie guy, to be able to say to all my friends, well, I've seen Tenet. And I can't talk to you about it because I don't want to spoil anything. I've actually seen, putting the Dark Knight movies in its own category, Tenet is actually the Nolan film I've seen the most. I think I've seen it at least 6 times.
Oh, wow.
I thoroughly enjoy the movie. I enjoy the challenge of the film. I enjoy sort of peeling back the layers every time I watch it and kind of had a better understanding. Oh, okay, know exactly what's going on. But I will end it by saying this. After 6 times seeing this movie, I'm thoroughly convinced that Sir Michael Caine had no idea what he was talking about when he has the meeting with John David Washington. Not a clue. Not a clue. All right? Michael, read these lines, because I'm telling you, it's, and I love Michael Caine, but I'm just saying he did not know anything he was talking about. So, Adam, I know you saw Tenet in the drive-in or on the side of a wall, or
there it is.
On the side of a wall. Yeah. There you go. I wanted to see it really badly just because at that point I had not been to a movie in 5 months. But I was not, in the position where I felt like I was comfortable to go inside of a theater, even with a mask on. So I was going to the drive-in a lot, and the drive-in by us was playing older movies like classics and stuff, and not newer movies. So I was bummed, but then I saw an opportunity to drive like 30 minutes away to a Regal theater, and they said that they were going to have like an outdoor screening of Tenet, and it was basically like a projection against the side of a brick wall. It was very weird. I was in the parking lot of the theater. It was next to a country western bar that was open, so like I would hear like Charlie Daniels band mixed with Tenet. Very strange. I will say it was the best experience watching the movie in terms of the audio experience because I was listening to the dialogue on an AM FM portable radio that I had in my car. And whatever noise bleed from the sound effects does not come through on the AM FM portable radio. But I watched it and I remember giving up very early and then just sort of staring at it because I was just like, well, I lost the thread and I can't. And the picture projected on the building was about as clear as watching the movie on the back of an airplane seat.
Yeah.
So it was just a headache to watch it that way. So I knew I needed to watch it again when it came out on digital rental, so I did that. And it's a situation where I just, for me at least up to this point, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. Like if I'll do the work, but I want it to be something that I get value out of by the end of it. And this movie, and to a lesser extent Inception, which I like enough but I've never loved, I just feel like it's going through a lot of narrative hoops and asking a lot of the audience, and I feel like it doesn't really resonate for me on any type of level other than as a puzzle. And I think that Memento is the best example of that in his deck of cards, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know. And I think, hot take of the show, I think John David Washington is one of the worst leading men in Hollywood right now. And I think that almost single-handedly sinks the movie completely.
Okay, so let me ask you real quick. I've seen it available now. The Creator, yes or no? Worth a watch?
I haven't seen it.
No,
I haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it. Okay, just you said John David Washington, and I just heard The Creator is an interesting movie because it was made by today's standards for a pretty modest budget. But all right, we'll get back to that. Okay, so that was 2020. All right, Adam.
Yeah.
2021.
I will go with Wrath of Man, Jason Statham's vehicle. I did not have high expectations of it because it was just advertised as a Jason Statham programmer, and Guy Ritchie directing it didn't mean a whole lot to me at that point. Like I had liked some of his movies here and there. Like I thought The Gentleman was pretty entertaining. That was his movie prior to it. It's not great, but it was fine. But Wrath of Man is like a whole other different kind of beast, and it would be a really good double with Den of Thieves. There's just these like armored car shoot 'em up heist type things. But the thing that I loved about Wrath of Man was it was so many different things all in one movie. Where like if you want a heist movie, you've got a heist movie. If you want a gangster movie, you got a gangster movie. If you want like a shootout, action movie, like you've got a shootout action movie. And it just felt like the best. Like there's the saying, you want to be watching a movie where you're in good hands with the filmmaker. And it's like, this is the movie that I didn't know that Guy Ritchie was born to make. And it's just incredible. It's exciting. The action sequences are super impactful. It has like Josh Hartnett in a weird supporting role where he's like a doofus and yet is like really good at it. And it's funny to see that because he was so like he was the high status lead actor in so many movies for such a long time. I can't remember the guy's name. It's like Holt something.
McCallany or something like that.
McCallany. He's so good in it. It's so good. It's like one of those movies that like is so good that it elevates like otherwise not great actors like Scott Eastwood. It's just like, oh, you cracked Scott Eastwood. Just put him in a part where I'm not supposed to like him, and he's fantastic. So yeah, this was another one where this was right when I was coming back to theaters. This was in 2021. It was like the first weekend of May. I had started going back in like late April of 2021 back to the movies. And it was like such a great welcome back to the movies. And then I saw Billy Crystal and Tiffany Haddish's Here Today. And I was like, oh, they're not all great.
Wrath of Man is a phenomenal film, and it's not lost on me that it's Guy Ritchie working with basically a $40 million budget, and Guy Ritchie has had the opportunity to work with, a few $100,000 to make Lock, Stock, to endless funds and resources when he's making films for Disney. I think he's at his best when he's constrained. It's like, hey, you get $40 million to make this movie, and filmmakers I think sometimes are at their best when they put limits on them and they say, hey, you can only work with this. You're not getting $1 more, and that was kind of my takeaway from the film. I thought the action scenes were excellent. I just overall thought it was a great movie. I have never been on the Statham train. Jason Statham, for me,
I wouldn't say that I am either, really.
He was always, the guy from the early Guy Ritchie movies. I said that, the guy from the early Guy. Okay, the man from the early Guy Ritchie movies back in the day. And I never got into, what was this movies? What
Transporter.
Transporter, yeah. And I've never seen those movies. They've never really been something I've wanted to watch. So it was Guy Ritchie's name that got me to see Wrath of Man. It was his name. I was like, oh, I'm going to give it a try because he's doing, it's a crime movie, Guy Ritchie? Done. I'm in. I'm going to give it a watch. So, Patrick, your thoughts on it?
Wrath of Man fucking rules. It's really good. I don't review a ton of new releases anymore because Rob does that so much on our site, but this was one of the few new releases that I got a screening link for before it came out, and I was excited because I hadn't gone to a movie theater in a long time, but here was a chance to see a new movie at home. And it's always a little intimidating to go out with an opinion when you don't know what the temperature of a movie is at all. You don't have anything to bounce off of. When I write about a movie that came out 20 years ago, I'm bouncing off of what people's perception of that movie is and saying the people are right, or I feel differently, or whatever. With Wrath of Man, I just had to come right out and say this is easily Guy Ritchie's best movie. And I still believe that. I hadn't liked a Guy Ritchie movie probably since Snatch, maybe, which was 2000. Yeah. It had been a long time since I liked a Guy Ritchie movie, and I just think it's really well made. It's really smart in the way that it doles out information slowly. Mm-hmm. I think it makes a great use of Jason Statham as kind of almost like a blank, whose mind is just set on one thing. Amazing score, great cinematography, great action, as Adam pointed out. It's really terrific.
Awesome. Perfect.
It was weird too because I went in expecting a Jason Statham vehicle, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but that sort of sets a certain expectation.
Yeah.
And when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, this is a movie that Denzel Washington could have starred in.
100%.
It's good enough for a better actor to be in. Mm-hmm. Although Statham, as you said, is really well cast in it. And now I'm just chasing Wrath of Man with every Statham movie. So I'm beyond excited to see The Beekeeper.
Yeah. I don't know if that
I'm ready.
could be Wrath of Man good.
I'm ready for it.
I think principal photography is wrapped on the second Hobbs and Shaw movie, so just buckle up.
I don't know it. I don't understand anything you just said.
That's even better. All right, Patrick, your 2021 movie.
Finally, I arrive at a movie that I know Adam likes, and that is Emma Seligman's Shiva Baby.
Yes.
Starring Rachel Sennett and co-written by Rachel Sennett. This was a short film that the two had made that they turned into a feature. I knew almost nothing about it when I saw it, and I was knocked out. It's one of those movies where you see it and you immediately fall in love with the filmmaker, and you're like, oh, I'll see anything this filmmaker makes from now on because I really love this movie. I don't deal well with like the comedy of awkwardness, but I think it's done so well here that I'm able to watch it. I think Emma Seligman and Rachel Sennett like thread the needle so well between what is uncomfortable and what is genuinely funny, that I'm able to get through it, because sometimes when something's too uncomfortable, I literally will get up and leave the room or like change the channel or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a lot of story threads that come together. I think the actors playing her parents, I don't remember their names, but especially the dad who shows up in a lot of Coen Brothers stuff, I think he's so funny. I think Rachel Sennett is like a born movie star. I didn't even mention Molly Gordon, Adam. I'm sorry. Molly Gordon, of course, in the movie.
I was going to do it if you didn't.
Killing it in a supporting role. Yeah, just a great comedy that harkens back to like the kinds of, I've been watching a lot of mid 90s movies lately, and there was the birth of this type of indie movie around 1995 that doesn't get made too much anymore. Shiva Baby feels like a real throwback to like a certain kind of 90s indie, and I mean that in the best way possible. Really, really strong, and the fact that then they followed it up with Bottoms this year is proof that like this is a director star / screenwriter pairing to really pay attention to.
Okay, so I'm just going to say real quick, this movie comes on my radar because of this movie. I remember you guys talking about the film, and it was on that list of I've got to get around to seeing this movie, and I saw that Bottoms was available on VOD, and I was like, well, I've got to watch this film. But now correlating that the two movies are by the same filmmaker, it's like, okay, no, wait, I'm going to watch Shiva Baby before I watch Bottoms. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that movie back to my attention, because I haven't seen it, but I do remember you both talking about it on This Movie. So, Adam?
It is currently streaming on HBO Max.
Okay, perfect.
You could watch both movies in under 3 hours.
I can make that happen.
Yeah. No, I love Shiva Baby. I have not to the same, circumstances exactly had these experiences, but I've had similar experiences where you're at an event with Jewish families and you're cornered by elder folks and they're very judgy. And like the subtext is just like, oh, so what are you doing? And it's just like you tell them and they're just like, oh, good for you. And then you just like know that they just hate what you just said. And then like you go on the offensive because you're like, yeah, I'm a total fuck up. It's great. And then you just want to see their like faces go white and stuff like that. It's pretty great. So Shiva Baby like tapped into that feeling for me. But I just think it's so clever and interesting and funny, and like it maintains like the tension of a movie like Mother, but as a comedy. So like you get like these builds of tension, but then these releases of laughs, and like maybe it's just me and like who I'm attracted to in Hollywood, but like it's one of the sexiest movies I've seen of like the 2020s. I love that it kind of lands on this like sort of secret romance behind the scenes, because that also kind of speaks to the generation gap also, of just love who you love and how it's different than kind of like the generations that came before us a little bit. And So what Patrick was saying about like kind of Emma Seligman and Rachel Sennett being this really great comedy team or just filmmaking team to look out for. If you compare, if I would love to watch Shiva Baby and then Bottoms right after it, because they're so funny in such different ways. Because Bottoms is very much absurdist reality, and Shiva Baby is like heightened reality, and they're equally funny. And a thing that I love about Rachel Sennett's brand of comedy especially is like she almost gets like double laughs on jokes, because like I'll give you a couple of examples. Like one is in Bottoms, she's talking about being a feminist, and then A.O. Edeberry is just like, your favorite show is Entourage. And it's funny because like she's claiming to be a feminist, but her favorite show is Entourage. But also it's just funny that her favorite show is Entourage. So it's like, so, and then like they used to, her and she did like these Comedy Central skits, and they were talking about like different dating things, and it starts with ghosting and then it just grows more and more absurd. And one is like, she's like, have you ever been Fogo de Chowd? And the other girl is just like, what's Fogo de Chowd? And it's like, it's when a guy invites you over and watches you eat steak for an hour. And it's funny because you're picturing that, but it's also funny that they called it Fogo de Chowd. So there's so much.
It's also funny that I would be willing to do that.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. It's just funny, like in all of their work, the writing is just so spot on. It's
awesome.
Wonderful.
That's awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to watch that film. I really can't. All right. So we are on to 2022, Adam.
Okay. I'm going to go with a movie that I didn't even intend to see, but Rob and I have a video at the end of the year for reserve seating called Lumps of Coal, where we each pick a movie that is either a poor performer at the box office or critically kind of not given a lot of credit, and we champion it. And Rob picked the movie Fall, and I did not have any intention of watching Fall, and I only watched it because he recommended it, and it's awesome. And it's a movie that I've watched like 2 or 3 times since the first time I watched it, and it's just another it's kind of like an open water type of movie, but instead of them being stranded in the middle of the ocean surrounded by sharks, they're these like kind of daredevil rock climbers, and then they decide to climb up like a giant like telephone tower almost. I can't remember exactly what the tower is, but they climb up this giant tower that's like thousands of feet in the air, and then they like get up there and then they lose their way of getting down. And it's just a matter of like, how do we get rescued? How do we get down from here? And there's vultures like and stuff like that. And it's just another one of those movies like Crawl, where you put yourself in the shoes of the protagonist and you're just like, what would I do in this situation? And then you're just kind of like shaking your head or like coaching them of like what to do or what not to do. And yeah, especially for like a PG-13 movie, like I haven't seen very many movies that are like this frightening before. And I know there's a sequel coming out. I don't know if that's a good idea. It seems like kind of a one and done premise, but it's another movie where you're kind of won over by the 2 lead performances. I don't remember the actors' names, but one of the women is from Shazam and one of the women is from the 2018 Halloween, and they're both very good. Yeah, I would just say like if you like thrillers and just kind of like survival type of movies, this would be a good one to check out if you haven't seen it.
I'm familiar with it. I haven't seen it, but yeah. Let me ask you a question. I haven't seen the movie, but it reminds me of a lot of films that, is there the trope in the film where they're trying to get somebody's attention at the bottom, or, you know, they just barely miss getting someone's attention? Does that happen in the film?
Yeah, I think there's like a part where like there's a car and they can see it, and then they decide to like throw a shoe down there with like a note and stuff like that and try to get the person's attention.
Those parts those tropes in those movies always give me the biggest anxiety. So,
Yeah.
but I'm going to watch it. All right, Patrick, your thoughts on Fall?
I haven't seen it. I have wanted to see it since that reserved seating video because I take Rob and Adam's recommendations very seriously, but I skipped it when it was out because I've been burned by this movie so many times.
Yeah.
I think I've liked it once, and that was Adam Green's Frozen, but otherwise I haven't totally been into this genre of movie, but I totally want to check it out.
Awesome.
I would say it's somewhere between, like, Frozen is the top.
Yeah.
Fall would be just underneath it, and then something like 47 meters down would be underneath that.
Okay, well, I don't love 47 meters down, so the fact that this is better gives me hope.
I'm helping.
The sequel to 47 meters down, is that the one with the ghost shark in it?
Maybe. I just remember John Corbett was in it and that it was really bad.
Was it like another 47 meters down or something? I don't remember the name. 47
meters down, Uncaged?
Uncaged, that's it. Right? Yep, that's it. Absolutely.
They should have done like 46 meters down, and then we just keep coming back up to the surface.
Yeah. Okay.
4 meters down.
All right, so Patrick, your 2022 film.
I'll go with another favorite of both mine and Adam's, and that is Terrifier 2.
Okay. All right.
Damien Leone's sequel to Terrifier, a movie I sort of actively disliked when I saw it because I was like, oh, this is not why I watch horror movies. And I've since kind of come around on it, but Terrifier 2 is much better in a lot of ways. It is, it's sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of murderous clown movies. It's like 2.5 hours.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's long, but it doesn't feel long, if that helps. Well, I take that back. The last act kind of does feel long. But again, the masterstroke is that it gives you someone to root for. It gives you Lauren Lavera as Sienna, who's a great final girl, something that the original Terrifier was missing. I find David Howard Thornton's performance as Art the Clown simultaneously disturbing and hilarious. I think Damien Leone grew a lot as a director between the first and second movie. I love the cinematography. I love the score. I like most of the characters. The gore that Damien Leone himself creates practically is kind of the best in the game right now. It's really impressive. It's a movie that I've seen way more times than I should ever admit.
So I will say that I started the original Terrifier. This would have been, I'm not sure when the original one came out. You guys can help me out on that. A couple of years ago.
2016?
Yeah, sure.
Somewhere back then. It was one of those, I was at home alone, the lights were off, and I just put it on. I can't remember how I watched it. I got through 20 minutes of it, and it's just creeping me out. I was just like, this is, and the performance of Art the Clown, I don't know what for whatever reason, I'm man enough to admit I was getting a little freaked out by the first one and said, this is not going to be for me. I don't think I'm going to be able to handle watching this home alone in the dark. That being said, Terrifier 2 is not a film I have seen, nor have I been wanting to see. I've heard you guys talk about it before, and the thing that scares me to death is I've heard high praise for the practical effects, and that's not something that I'm going to be really good with. That stuff really gets me. It really, the extent of practical effects for me is 1978's Dawn of the Dead. I can tolerate that, but then they've gotten so much more sophisticated to the point where it's just too much for me. I understand they're making a third Terrifier movie.
Comes out next October.
Adam, your thoughts on Terrifier 2?
I loved it the first time I saw it, and I was shocked because I was not a fan of the first Terrifier, as Patrick said, for the same reasons. And then once I latched on to the final girl with Lauren Lavera and that there's a rooting interest, I found it a lot more easy to take. It was definitely a movie that I almost like had a panic attack before watching it because like I had heard and read about like I thought to prepare myself for the gore, reading about it first so I knew what was going to happen would help. And it just made me more anxious. And I honestly have only seen it the one time. I have tried to watch it again, but I'm afraid that it was a magic trick that I'm not going to be able. And though I would almost not want to know than know that like it was a one and done for me. So I know I'll eventually go back to it probably before Terrifier 3. I think the thing that I'm still wrestling with, and I think the movie's very exciting and very good, and it definitely feels like a boost similar to Rob Zombie from House of a Thousand Corpses to The Devil's Rejects, or like James Cameron from like Terminator to Terminator 2 on like its own respective scale. Like it's that much of an expansion. I'm trying to crack how much the filmmakers are turned on by the violence and how much of it is, it's part of it, but that's not like what the driving force is. It's like the character or the storytelling or whatever. And I'm hoping the answer is the latter. And it's not just that they're turned on by the violence. But when I met him at the convention, I kind of got the suspicion that he's turned on by the violence. And I sort of retreated just slightly. And the Terrifier 3 teaser, as exciting as it is that it's a Christmas movie, I am a little concerned that I don't want them to kill children on screen. If it's off screen, that's not okay either. But it's bad. I'll find ways to excuse it, I guess, if it's off screen. But I don't know. I'm a big fan of the second one, but I'm also a little afraid of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I can tell you this. I will be tuning in next year to F this movie to hear your guys' thoughts on Terrifier 3. So
we've already said that that's going to be like our Scary Movie Month episode.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do we even need to do 2023, or are you guys both unanimously putting Exorcist Believer as the movie you're recommending for?
Did you watch that?
No, I won't.
There's a character. I want you to watch it. You want to know why?
Tell me why.
There's a character in it who looks exactly like you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And he's a bad dad.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm going to take my glasses off here for a second here. Well, now I have to watch it, Adam.
Yeah.
Now I have to watch it.
I'll just send you a photo. That might help instead of you actually watching it. It sucks.
Listen, I showed my girlfriend had actually never seen the original Exorcist. And we had a hurricane situation here back in September where there was a hurricane coming through Florida. It didn't look like it was going to come anywhere near us, but as a precaution, pretty much the entire state shuts down. So we're home alone. We've got to both have the day off from work, and we decided to put The Exorcist on. And, she said to me, I know I'm going to enjoy this film, but let's be realistic. It's 50 years old. I'm sure it's going to be kind of hokey and a little bit, dated. Trust me, I think by the time the movie's over, you're going to say, I shouldn't have said that. We watched The Exorcist. I'm seeing her reactions in real time, and she is shocked by what's happening. And when the movie's over, she said, I was wrong, and that movie is fucking incredible. And we had this long, 2-hour discussion about the film, which speaks to the power of that movie some 50 years later, that you can have this very in-depth discussion where we're talking about it's not a movie about possession. It's really it's Chris McNeil's story, and it's about an atheist who exhausts every possible avenue before eventually, she wouldn't have even gone to a priest had a doctor not suggested it to her. We had this long discussion. And then I see the trailer for Exorcist Believer, and I'm like, no, they've missed the entire point of the original Exorcist.
Yeah.
They've missed the entire point. I will not see. Well, now I have to see it because you said there's somebody that looks just like me. But other than that, I would have never seen the movie.
I have a couple things to say. So, Patrick, I promised to tell you what the weird thing that stuck out to me about Exorcist Believer was. I'll tell you off mic here because I forgot to tell you off mic on the Meet Joe Black episode. But Dana, there's a part in Exorcist Believer that is so unbelievably dark, and they just kind of skate past it because I think they're betting that they're going to have 2 more Exorcist movies. But since this one did so poorly, that if they just stop it here, that's like the most fucked up thing you could do in a movie, this type of movie.
I heard you say that on the episode the other day. I remember I'm saying that was the one intriguing thing. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but I'll tell you guys later. But the thing that's cool about Exorcist for me is like I never had the chance to like be scared by the original Exorcist because I saw Repossessed many times before I saw The Exorcist. But The Exorcist always worked for me as a drama, and my in is always Father Karras.
Yeah.
And like I always view it through his point of view. And I find the movie like incredibly resonant and dramatic through that lens. So it's like The Sixth Sense, even if the horror element or the twist or whatever is worn off. Like I think there's a lot of meat on the bone still in those movies.
There's 3 different movies you could make with the characters there. You could have Father Karras, dealing with his, lack of faith. I mean, there's so many things. I'm sorry,
BJ Cobb, movie cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to see a TV series called Movie Cop.
I want to see the movie that Chris McNeil was shooting. I want to see, we only see her shoot that one scene on the college campus. But you know what, guys? I just realized we're going to run a little long. Let's get to the 2023 movies. This is entirely my fault. I brought up The Exorcist Believer. Excuse me, Adam.
Yeah,
your 2023 movie.
It's been. I would say Mobland, but we've talked about Mobland a lot, and your audience knows that we're all kind of pro Mobland. So I'm gonna go with the movie Somebody I Used to Know on Amazon. It's a romantic comedy, very much like My Best Friend's Wedding, starring Alison Brie. And the thing that I found myself enjoying a lot about it is I figured out that Alison Brie is like maybe the only actor forging an identity like a movie star would theatrically back in the day, but on streaming. Mm-hmm. There's an Alison Brie vehicle almost like every year, whether it's like Horse Girl or Spin Me Round or Somebody I Used to Know. And you can kind of always know what you're going to get out of it. And they're always good. And she's always great in them. And this one is just like, in terms of a romantic comedy, it's got all the pleasures of that genre. The leads are very likable. It's funny. Like Haley Joel Osment, I love that he's forged this little niche in his adult career where it's like, what if you were a child prodigy actor, but now you're just buffoon adult? And he has like this great running bit where he's like the guy always quoting movies, but like it's like he'll see like Alison Brie and he's like, oh, somebody call Brendan Fraser because we got a blast from the past here. And it's so like not funny that it circles back around to being funny. Or like he's putting and he's just like Bagger Vance, Bagger Vance, Bagger Vance. So there's just a lot of cool stuff in it. And like if you're a Community fan like I was, like Danny Pudi's in it also. So seeing like Alison Brie and Danny Pudi like have a bunch of scenes together is great. And it's one of the rare streaming movies that doesn't feel like a streaming movie. It feels like a real movie. It's well shot. It's just just a great example of the genre. And it was a movie that I kind of liked when I saw it at the beginning of the year. And then I went back to it when I was starting to do like rewatches for possible top 10s, and it shot way up in my ranking because it's just the type of movie that you can put on anytime.
Awesome.
And it's really good.
Okay, that keeps popping up on my Amazon. I just haven't watched it yet, so I'll put that on the list. I do want to say one thing before I go to Patrick with his pick for 2023. I cannot say enough good things about Mobland, because I just want to emphasize that this is a movie that is made in the exact same system of all those, all the Bruce Willis movies. These are the same producers, the same budget, the same 11-day shoots, the same everything. And it looks just cinematically, it looks like a movie with 5 times the budget. So I just, again, for people that have listened to my interview with Nicholas Maggio, the director, I can't, recommend that movie enough for what it is, so I'm sorry, just want any chance I can to just, pump up Mobland a little bit, I will. Patrick, your 2023 movie.
It's a movie that I think it's one of my favorite movies of the year that I think is already being forgotten and is probably destined to be forgotten. It is M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, which is an adaptation of Paul Tremblay's book, Cabin at the End of the World, I think it's called, which I have not read. After I saw Knock at the Cabin, I read a little bit about the book, and I know there's some controversy because the ending was changed and he took a few liberties with it. I actually kind of prefer the movie ending based on what I know, but maybe had I read the book, maybe the book builds me up to that ending in a way that makes more sense, and maybe I'm more a fan of the book's ending. I haven't read it, I can't say. But it's essentially just about a couple and their daughter, who it's almost sort of a home invasion-y type thing. Yeah. Some people show up at their house and say the world is ending and is going to end unless you do this terrible thing. And I get where people might say it's a little bit repetitive because it does set up something and then plays it out a few times, but it goes back to what we were saying about 10 Cloverfield Lane. I give a movie so much credit for going where it promises to go, and Knock at the Cabin is not only very beautiful and well acted and suspenseful and tense and interesting, and I'm on board for all of it. And then, to its credit, it also goes to a place that a lot of movies are a little afraid to go, and I give M. Night Shyamalan a ton of credit for that. I haven't loved every one of his recent movies, but I find all of them interesting, and in many ways they warrant repeat viewings because I find myself coming back to them, trying to find a way in, even to the ones I didn't love Glass, but I've gone back and rewatched Glass a couple of times because I'm like, I really like M. Night Shyamalan. I want to find a way into this movie. I don't even need that with Knock at the Cabin. Even on the first viewing, I kind of loved it.
So for me, Knock at the Cabin, this is one of those rare situations where I can't honestly tell you that I ever recall this happening, where I went to see this movie sight unseen, meaning I had not seen the trailer, I had not read the book, I did not know the plot synopsis. I went into this movie as cold as possible. Just because it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie, I said, you know what, I'm going to go watch this. All I knew was that Dave Bautista was in the movie. I knew nothing. What a fucking experience I had watching this movie. Because like you, Patrick, I kept saying to myself, are they really going to go for it? And I'm going to keep this spoiler free. But the scenes involving airplanes, that's all I'm going to say is, oh, they really are going for this. They really are. And again, it's one of those movies that puts you in the shoes of our lead characters and asks the question, what would you have done if you were in that situation? Because it is truly the most impossible situation you're being asked. I thought the movie was incredible. And I remember when I left the theater, I sat in my car, I pulled my phone out, and I said, I'm going to watch the trailer now because I want to know how much of this movie is spoiled by the trailer. And I would tell all of you listening, if you have not seen Knock at the Cabin, do not watch the trailer. Go into the movie as cold as possible. You're going to have the best possible experience. Adam, your thoughts at Knock on the Cabin?
I really liked it. I am a fan of M. Night Shyamalan, even when his movies are, quote unquote misses. I find a lot of interesting things in them. I just like his sensibility. He's so unique in his way of telling stories. And yeah, when I saw Knock at the Cabin opening weekend, I immediately would say like it was my fifth favorite of his movies. It's never gonna budge. Like Unbreakable Signs, Sixth Sense are always gonna be rotating top three, and then Split, and then I would say Knock at the Cabin. But, and I mean this in a nice way, but it's the reality of being an M. Night Shyamalan fan. It was the first movie of his in a long time where I felt like I didn't need to apologize for liking it.
Yeah.
I felt like I could recommend it to people and not do it with qualifiers. I think it's just a really good execution of a strong thriller plot. And Dave Bautista's great in it. Mm-hmm. The rest of the cast is like just uniformly good too. But he's the real standout. And I love to champion M. Night Shyamalan because we need more, and I say this in a nice way, we need more weirdos like him, where it's just like, he's, what if Rod Serling was like sort of, I won't say that Rod Serling wasn't spiritual, but like, M. Night Shyamalan feels like he's been to the other side and came back with like an understanding of humanity that nobody else but him has. And I don't say that like as like he's profound in one way or not profound, but I just say that in, like he's got such a perspective of his own, and him applying that to genre pieces makes him so idiosyncratic and somebody that even if you're not a fan of like his individual movies, I can't imagine like there's so many people who just have their pitchforks out for the guy, and I don't get that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, gentlemen, I just want to tell you before we wrap up that just to kind of circle back to something I said at the beginning of the episode, and I said that, when I used to listen to F in this movie way back in the day, more than 10 years ago, I used to say that I felt like I was, in the room having a conversation with these guys. So I just want you to know that it never, ever is lost on me that I'm in the room having a conversation with you guys. And that's such a big deal for me. So I just want to say thank you, Adam. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to everyone at F This Movie, the entire ensemble cast that you have. I'm a fan of everybody involved, and I just really appreciate you guys taking what is looking like to be close to 3 hours of your time just to shoot the shit with me and talk movies. It's an absolute honor, guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for always being so supportive and so vocal and such a great fan of the show and using it as an inspiration to launch your own amazing podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Patrick.
Yeah, and it's been just such a pleasure just becoming your friend through the podcast. And yeah, I'm so proud of the work that you've done, Dana, and I love talking movies with you at any time, whether it's on mic or off mic.
Yeah, and guys, I appreciate everything. That's awesome. So hopefully we're doing this in another 10 years. Hopefully you guys are here. We're still doing all this so we can do the 20-year podcast episode. Patrick, if people want to find F This Movie, there is, of course, links in this episode's show notes that can take the listeners to your show. But if people want to find you, what's the easiest way?
Go to fthismovie.com or search in Apple Podcasts for F This Movie. We have new shows every Wednesday, and we have written content every other day of the week. So we're a fully functioning movie website, not just a podcast. And we're at F This Movie on Twitter.
And if I could add to that, be sure to subscribe to their Patreon because the bonus episodes have been well worth it. I know I've been enjoying them. So Adam, you are co-host of a show, Reserve Seating, which is available on the F This Movie YouTube channel. Can you talk just a little bit about Reserve Seating?
Yeah, definitely. It's a weekly show that I do with my co-host Rob DiCristino, and we talk about it's just really just kind of a variety of different things. Sometimes it's topical, sometimes it's based off of a particular movie. We do theme months, so currently we're 3/4 of the way into a theme month about Rob's favorite movies. So our next episode is going to be about The Silence of the Lambs, but then we have a whole bunch of holiday goodness and end of year goodness coming up, where we're going to talk about our lumps of coal, like these kind of underrated, underseen movies of 2023, and we'll talk about our favorite songs from 2023 movies and things like that. So yeah, just some good old movie related ephemera every Thursday for you on YouTube.
Awesome. And thank you. I've been lucky enough to be a guest twice on Reserve Seating, so thank you. Always have a blast talking with you guys. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the 10th anniversary episode. Once again, I want to thank my guests today, Patrick Bromley and Adam Riske from the F This Movie world, as I will call it, because like you said, Patrick, it is more than a podcast. It's a complete cinema experience in my book. So gentlemen, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Dana.
And my name is Dana Buckler, and thank you so much for listening.